Check. Oh. We're back here. Check. All right, there we go. All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming to the regular Reno City Planning Commission meeting of Wednesday, March 15th, 2003. We will start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Armstrong, would you like to lead us?
Yeah, absolutely.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. We will move to item number 2, roll call. Michelle, please.
J.D. Draculich,
Here.
Harris Armstrong,
Here.
Peter Gower, Mark Johnson,
Here.
Arthur Munoz is absent, Sylvia Villanueva is absent, Alex Felto.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right, thank you. Moving on and opening item number 3, public comment. This item is for either public comment on any action item or for any general public comment. Michelle?
It should be noted for those in the audience that comments are to be addressed to the Planning Commission as a whole. Comments heard under this item will be limited to 3 minutes per person and may pertain to matters both on and off the Planning Commission agenda. Please note that the Planning Commission may not take action upon any matter not agendized for possible action on today's agenda. When you are called on for public comment, please state your name for the record and begin speaking. The timer will begin when you say your name, and you will be afforded 3 minutes. If you are an attendee in the Zoom meeting and would like to make public comment at this time, please raise your hand. Lastly, while in this room, please be respectful. Warnings will be issued by the presiding officer if there is disruptive behavior, and you will be asked to leave chambers if the behavior continues. So we did receive correspondence that was general in nature. Those were forwarded to the Planning Commission and have been entered into the record. I did not receive any request to speak forms, and I did not receive any voicemails.
All right, thank you. Does anybody in the chambers wish to speak at general public comment? Okay, we will close item number 3. Moving on to item number 4, approval of minutes. Item number 4.1, Reno City Planning Commission regular meeting, February 1st, 2023.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Johnson, I'll move to approve the minutes from Wednesday, February 1st, 2023.
Commissioner Gower, second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Item number 4.2, Reno City Planning Commission regular February 15th, 2023 minutes.
Mr. Chair, keeping it going, Commissioner Johnson moved to approve meeting minutes from Wednesday, February 15th.
Commissioner Gower, second. I was waiting for Commissioner.
All right.
Armstrong. It's a little slow.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any of those opposed, Mr. Velta? Did we lose him?
No, sorry, I forgot to unmute.
And what is your vote for the minutes for February 15th?
I'm voting in favor.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you. All right, we'll close item number 4, moving to item number 5, Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Agency Annual Report. Looks like Grace has a presentation for us. Thank you.
Yes, good evening. Grace McAdin, Senior Management Analyst for the record, here tonight to discuss the annual report to Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Agency. So this report comes before the Commission every year. Both state law and the regional plan require local jurisdictions to provide an annual report highlighting the city's numerous efforts throughout the calendar year to implement the Truckee Meadows Regional Plan. This year, some of the highlights we will go over include affordable housing efforts, sustainability milestones, and some projects that had some regional impacts. So affordable housing continues to be a top goal for the City Council and the region as a whole. In 2022, the City of Reno waived $3.5 million in sewer connection fees for affordable housing. We waived $480,000 in building permit fees and approved 787 multifamily affordable units. Council contributed over $37 million towards affordable housing initiatives. Sustainability is another goal that the city is working on. Last year, we received the Soul Smart Silver designation and LEED Gold certification for the first time in city history, and we have continued to participate in the Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Agency's Natural Resource Plan. We have made substantial progress in the new Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Master Plan that the city is leading that effort this year. So moving on to some projects that came before the commission that had a regional impact. These all went to Regional Planning Commission for conformance review. We processed 4 master plan amendments last year. Peavine Employment Center, Meridian 120 South Open Space, Canyons Edge, and DPI, MPA, and ZMA. And in addition to that, we processed 87 planning cases through the discretionary review process. So this report that was in your packet not only summarizes what we accomplished in 2022, but we also discuss our efforts and goals for 2023. So we will continue to prioritize affordable housing and sustainability initiatives. We are focusing on the Title 18 zoning code amendments to make sure some of these processes get better, and continuing to collaborate on the natural resource and public infrastructure investment plan that Regional is coordinating. And we are currently in the middle of the 2023 legislative session where we're reviewing any bills that may impact the city and the region as a whole. So for tonight, we are just asking that you accept the 2022 annual report and recommend that the City Council do the same. That concludes my presentation, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you very much. Jason, I'm assuming we need to open it up to commissioners for disclosures on this?
Be safe on that?
Okay,
I don't think so, but
I wasn't quite sure. Commissioner Gower, if you want to kick it off.
Commissioner Gower, no disclosures.
Commissioner Armstrong, no disclosures.
Commissioner Johnson, no disclosures.
Commissioner Draculich.
Commissioner Nelson, no disclosures.
Great, thanks, buddy. Commissioner Draculich, no disclosures. Great, then I guess we will open it up to the commissioners for questions or discussion.
Can we do public comment?
Oh, I'm
Just-
so
yeah,
sorry.
sorry.
My apologies. Yeah, and do we have any public comment for this item?
We did not receive any public comment, no request to speak forms, and no voicemails were received.
Okay. Does anybody in the chambers wish to speak publicly on this item? Okay, seeing no one, we will close public comment and then move to the commissioners for any questions or discussion. Or a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'm prepared to make a motion. First, I just want to, again, compliment staff on putting this together again this year. There's a lot of information that is compiled here. I like the fact that we saw 87 cases. That's kudos to us. Sorry. But anyway, thank you for putting that together, Jason, all the staff working on that. And based on that, I move to accept the 2022 annual report, recommend the council accept the same report and forward to the Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Commission and Regional Planning Governing Board.
All right, we have a motion.
Commissioner Armstrong, I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? No. Motion passes. Thank you, Grace. All right, we will move on to item 6, public hearings. Item 6.1, case number LDC 23-00047, Lux Locker Condition Amendment. And it looks like we're going to have a presentation from the applicant.
We have David on the Zoom meeting. He will be presenting. We're just moving him into the meeting. Okay. David?
Hi.
Can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay, go ahead and state your name for the record, and you have 15 minutes to present.
Sure. My name is David Ferretti. My address is 7324 Precourt Manor Way. I can share my screen here. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Is that the way to do it? Just share my screen?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. And can everyone see it? Oh, there we go.
Yes.
So I'm with Lux Locker. We're back here again. We had approval back in December of 2021 through our massaging of the site and additional development of our site, we were able to add a few more units. We went from, and this is why the main reason why we're here. We were going through our civil permit and our condo plat, and we got flagged for having too many units. It's an oversight by us, unfortunately. We're back here. We originally had 165 units, and we now have 184 units. Previously, when it was approved, it was a 115,000 square feet for the total project, and we're now at 119,000 square feet. Those are the significant changes from the last time it was approved. I can go ahead and walk you through this site. The use is still the same. We still have the Planning Commission conditions we still need to follow as well too. We can go over those if we need to, but we're not pushing back on any of these. This is an RV, a luxury RV and boat storage, although you can store anything legally allowed in there. This is an S1 use, no hazardous material, of course. The average size is about 15 feet wide, 15 feet high, and about 50, 60 feet deep. The unique thing about this site is we condo each one of the individual units out, and we're going through the condo process now with the city, and we sell them out individually. Lux Locker will then maintain the ownership of the overall site and be responsible for landscape, maintenance, security, and we collect common area maintenance fees to provide that service. This is actually our second site in the area. We have one in Spanish Springs that came online and opened their doors in 2021 as well too. It was very successful. It sold out pretty quickly, and which is why we're back here. We're on the corner of Panther Drive and North Virginia, up here in the north. This is a small area right off. There's a Mavericks right there, and just right off there, just west of the 395. The biggest change here. So this is our site plan. Before we had B, C, D, and E. This A has been slightly massaged to allow for a few units, and we condensed some of the small units, so we got more units out of them. Like I said, overall, we added about 3% more, or 4,000 square feet. The materials, all the conditions, those aren't changing. Our drives aren't changing. So I'm happy to go over the project itself. If you want to spend more time, and I have additional pictures. This is the elevations that were all previously approved and weren't changing, but I'm really here to answer any questions the commission may have. I'll go back to the site plan here.
All set, David. Thank you very much. We'll now take a presentation from the city.
David, thank you. David, could you also take your presentation down? Thank you very much.
And I will.
He's getting
There we
it
go.
just a second.
Okay. All right. So I'll be brief on this as well. As David indicated, Lux Locker was approved in December of 2021, and they have increased their request, the request is to increase the number of units from 165 to 184, 19 additional units. Here's the site. David showed you that as well. What changed? The increased unit count, which resulted from some efficiencies, 3.4% increase in building square footage, that slight grading modification and building A rotation that David talked about. The max fill decreased from 16.46 feet down to 1511. And I did also want to point out that the commission last time had added a condition regarding horizontal projections, and they have submitted elevations showing those horizontal projections as required by condition 12. This is a comparison of the previous site plan on the left and then the new site plan on the right. The building A circled in red shows the orientation, how it was modified. Here are the recommended findings for the tentative map and the recommended motion. available for questions.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate that. We'll now kick it to the commissioners for disclosures. Commissioner Johnson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Commissioner Johnson, no disclosures.
Commissioner Armstrong, no disclosures. Commissioner Gower, no disclosures.
Commissioner Draculich, familiar with the site?
Commissioner Melto, familiar with the site.
All right, thank you. We'll now open it up to public comment. Michelle, I don't see any requests to speak forms here. Do we have anybody who would like to speak?
I did not receive any requests to speak forms, no voicemails, no correspondence was received. So I think you're good to go. I don't think we have anybody on the Zoom meeting that wishes to speak at this time either. No.
All good? Thank you. Anybody in the chambers wish to comment on this item? Seeing none, we will close public comment and move to the commissioners for questions or discussion. Or a motion.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Johnson, I guess first thing, David, thank you. I know the condition to add the horizontal shade structures was one that was discussed here, and I appreciate that being included. So with that, in the case number LDC 23-00047, based upon compliance with the applicable findings, I move to approve the modification of LDC 22-00029 as proposed, and I can make all the findings.
Thank you. We have a motion.
Commissioner Gower, I'll second. I can make all the findings.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Thanks. I keep forgetting about you, buddy. Sorry about that. Motion passes. Good luck with your project, David.
Thank you very much, all.
You bet. All right, we'll now move on to item number 6.2, case number LDC 23-00043, Cool Classics International 2. Looks like we will take a presentation from the applicant.
Hello, good evening. Thank you. Derek Wilson on behalf of the property owner, the applicant. This is a small auto dealership. A little bit of a non-standard auto dealership that I'll explain in a second. The request is a conditional use permit in the MS zone. So the project location, it can be a little hard to visualize if you'd never go there. It's a South Virginia Street address, but you get to it basically by going in the driveway to the Winco Foods, and then there's sort of a dead end in commercial complex back there. So the area in yellow is the project site. You can see it's partially built. And a building for that northernmost parcel was being planned when this use came along. So tonight we're just officially approving the use. The buildings, one building's in place, a second building was already planned to happen. It's in process. Grading is going on now, and then this use was brought to the site. The reason for that is that this property owner has been active in this area for a while. They built that current Tesla dealership you can see at the bottom of this site. They built that as their own dealership site, and then Tesla came along and bought it and made them an offer that they felt was worth accepting. They moved their operation to the other car dealer that's sort of in the middle of this diagram. So they're operating a car dealership out of that tiny little site, and then the area in yellow was going to be car storage. They're car collectors. So they're sort of dealers by accident. People call them up and say, look, I need this 1962 Ferrari. Do you have one? Yes. And then they'll sell it. And they do that through that small building labeled car dealer in this exhibit. However, another buyer came along and said, we want to buy your small car dealer site. They said, fine. Again, a good offer. They took it. But now they need to bring their car dealer license to the area in yellow. So they're bouncing around with where they actually sell their cars. So now they're storing and selling cars in the same location. Right now they're storing cars in that southern building inside the yellow. And then the second building that's under construction now was going to also be storage. Now they're just bringing the dealership license to that site. So I realize that's a convoluted thing, but it's important to understand that they haven't been in operation illicitly. This is essentially a new car dealership on a new site for them. As you can see, we're adjacent to the freeway. We're part of a commerce center, so it's primarily industrial buildings around us. Also, obviously, there are car dealer uses in the area already. We have 2 car dealerships adjacent to this project site, so it's not an unknown use to the area. Going to be roughly 68,000 square feet of space in the 2 buildings. The tan areas are the one existing and then the proposed building. That triangle building is the one under construction. Code compliant, no zoning changes or variances needed. The area is very well suited to bulk retail. There's a flooring business, a hot tub dealer, other car dealerships in the area. So essentially, this area was built for these kind of large retail uses. That's the old Tesla site, and this is where we're a non-standard business. Tesla is somewhat of a new business model. The old car dealerships, 400 cars out front, people drive by, they pull in, they look at the cars. That doesn't happen at Tesla. It's not going to happen at this site. It's not a drive-by business. It's appointment only. So going to be very low traffic at the site. People are going to make an appointment ahead of time, going to show up, going to look at that one specific car they're interested in. They maybe take it for a test drive, and then they conclude the deal or not. So it's much more of the appointment only kind of business model. The zone that we're in is specifically intended for auto-oriented uses. MS District intended for a mix of low-intensity auto-oriented uses, so that's exactly what we are. Design features, we meet the parking requirement. Importantly, we are fixing storm drainage problems in the area. So along that northwestern property line, there's been long-standing drainage issues exacerbated by the construction of the freeway that never adequately accommodated stormwater flows under the freeway. So we've spent a great deal of time expanding and enhancing the drainage channel that runs along that northwest property line. And that's to the benefit of all the properties in the area. That benefits our site as well as properties to the west. I also need to point out that there are 2 small houses to our northwest along that same property line. There's no residential zoning, but there are 2 old houses. And I feel that this use is in a way going to benefit them. It's going to act as a sound buffer between them and the freeway. If you ever go out to this site, you can imagine the freeway generates quite a bit of noise. So our use, the auto dealership use, is going to be very low intensity, low noise generating. The building is going to act as a sound barrier. Another important feature is that we've been in touch with those owners throughout the life of the development of these 2 sites. Because of the engineering work along that northwest boundary, we've had to coordinate with those neighbors. We've worked with them on enhancing the drainage channel, on working with them on where their fences were. They had some fences that were kind of on our side of the line. We've worked with them on that, and then on enhancing that fence, and generally making them satisfied that we're bringing improvements to the area. So we've had a working relationship with them. We intend to keep that. We haven't had any objections from them. So I don't want to speak for other people ever, but I feel that we've been good neighbors with them as far as this process. Infill project, that's a major master plan issue. Our architecture exceeds the normal warehouse standards. So this was kind of a boutique business, this car collecting and storage. So the building was meant to look appealing. It now makes that function better as an auto dealership. It's a nice place to hang out. So it certainly exceeds some of the standard concrete tilt-up construction in the area. Traffic generation is very low. If we were a standard warehouse or an auto dealership, we'd have much higher daily trips and peak hour. The proposed project, we have very low peak numbers, so minimal traffic impact. So that's my presentation. I realize there's some convoluted history about how we got here, but as far as the project, I think it's pretty straightforward. So I'll be happy to elaborate if people have questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Derek. All right, now we have a presentation from the city.
Okay, Jeff Foster, Associate Planner for the record again. Cool Classics International, LDC 2343. So the project site is approximately 3.13 acres over 3 parcels, as Derek indicated. The conditional use permit is just to allow the automotive dealership in the zone. Derek talked about the history. I'm not going to go back into that. I think it's worth pointing out that the existing dealership is in the old Vespa Triumph dealership building. That's where they're currently located on parcel 2, shown on the map where the CCI arrow is. And then you can also see the arrow to the Tesla, again, as a frame of reference. A grading and site improvement permit was approved that is allowing the work that's underway that Derek referred to. The building is not under construction, just the site improvement work is under construction. The building has not yet been permitted. But again, the entitlement is just for the use, not for the building or any kind of design elements on the building. And then again, the vehicle storage warehouse on the parcel 06. The key issues that staff saw are building and site design, residential compatibility, and hydrology and drainage. Just as a frame of reference, the top picture is the existing building, Cool Classics International. The bottom building is the warehouse building on that lower parcel. And then in the picture on the right, which you also saw in Derek's presentation, but I've circled the drainage channel. That's the drainage channel along that western or northwestern property line. So you can see kind of where that actual drainage channel is at. So here's the master plan and the zoning. A couple more pictures just because they're fun to take. And it was a pretty day, unlike most days in the last several weeks. So the site, the upper left corner is a picture looking north. The drainage channel that you can see is just kind of off to the left. You can see it right there, maybe above that cone on the left. The picture to the right is a mini storage that's just on the other side of the fence line on the west. One of the businesses that's to the south on the lower left. And then the final picture is a picture looking across the site, looking north towards the freeway, and you can see the freeway borders the site there. So building and site design, the existing building that already exists on parcel 06 holds up to 120 cars. The new building holds, the proposed building, not there yet, will hold up to 240 cars. And it's important to note that that storage area for those cars essentially fulfills the function of a parking lot at a traditional dealership. So in essence, all of the activities will happen inside the storage, and the sales efforts and whatnot will be inside. The design is consistent with other buildings in the area in terms of building mass and height, and the site meets minimum landscaping and parking. Residential compatibility, Derek brought that up, that there are 2 residences to the west. Even though those parcels are not zoned residential, the fact that they're next door to the site, staff felt it warranted a traditional residential adjacency analysis, especially regarding things like light and noise, right? So condition number 5, we put on in terms of limiting hours and days of construction. They are proposing modern cutoff light fixtures. That helps. They've also, staff proposed and the applicant agreed to all of these conditions actually, but the 6-foot high solid screening wall that will help with light and noise. We've also included a condition to turn off lighting by 10 p.m., except for security level lighting, and limit the building height lighting on that western facade to 12 feet. And it's important to note that in code, lighting on buildings next to residential is allowed to be 18 feet. So we proposed 12, and they agreed to it. Also, condition 8 includes limited hours of operation. The noise should be low due to the business model. Derek suggested that, and we agree. But we did include a couple of conditions, roll-up doors on that western facade, and there's at least one roll-up door on that western facade. We are conditioning that, or recommending conditioning it to keep those doors closed at all times except for access. And then last but not least, condition 10 regarding prohibiting outdoor servicing of vehicles. The last issue I wanted to talk about is hydrology and drainage. The site is mostly in shaded X, but the previously approved site improvements permit shows that they've demonstrated compliance with code as far as being built in a flood zone area. Staff has included 2 conditions related to hydrology and drainage. One, condition 11, is to, in effect, make sure that historical drainage from the west is uninterrupted, that it is conveyed through to the drainage channel. And then condition number 12 is regarding overall drainage channel capacity for the existing flows from the site as well as other areas upstream flows. Here are the recommended findings and the recommended motion, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. We will now go to the commissioners for disclosures. Commissioner Velto, why don't you go ahead?
Commissioner Velto, familiar with the site?
All right, Commissioner Gower.
Commissioner Gower, also familiar with the site. Commissioner Armstrong, also familiar with the site.
Commissioner Johnson, same disclosures.
Commissioner Dracula, same disclosures. All right, we will now open up for public comment. Michelle, do we have any requests to speak forms?
I did not receive any request to speak forms, no voicemails, and no correspondence was received. I don't believe we have anybody on Zoom that wishes to speak on this item either.
Okay, thank you. Anybody in the chambers wish to speak on this item? Seeing none, we will close public comment and go to the commissioners for questions.
Chair, Commissioner Johnson, question for you, Jeff. Just as in terms of looking at this, obviously this is a conditional use permit for, what is it, essentially auto dealership.
Correct.
So we heard in the presentation, both from the applicant and from yourself, that this is, I guess, not the traditional type, that we're looking at storage of the cars on the interior. We've got a limited parking space outside. I guess from staff's perspective, certainly the reason why this conditional use permit exists in this zone is to address traffic, lighting, all of those things that happen with a traditional situation. As you said, if the building's not built yet, I know it's planned, I know there's grading and everything going on, but did staff sort of review this from the perspective of this could be maybe a traditional, that is a difficult point to access if this was to be maybe more of a heavy traffic generator, but we're being asked to approve that as an overall use. So how did staff sort of review the idea of an auto dealership of more than 12 cars with this particular location?
So I think we reconciled that with the fact that it's all indoors, so there's not, you wouldn't have there's no room for outdoor parking or outdoor storage of the vehicles and in that more full-scale auto sales approach.
Okay, so the idea is you were looking at the specific design that was being looked at for the building, not so much the idea of the use per se, because the use was going to be within that building?
That's a fair statement. Yep.
Thank you, appreciate that. Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Velto, do you want to chime in, buddy?
No questions here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? Do we want to move into discussion or entertain a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'm ready to make a motion if there's no discussion.
Please.
Okay. Case number LDC 23-00043, Cool Classics International 2. Based upon compliance with the applicable findings, I move to approve the conditional use permit, subject to the conditions listed in the staff report, and I can make all the findings.
Thank you. We have a motion.
Commissioner Armstrong, I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All right, we'll take a vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, motion passes unanimously. Good luck with your project. Thank you. All right, we'll close that item and move on to item 6.3, case number LDC 23-00046, Battleborn Football Club Complex. And it looks like we'll take a presentation from the applicant's representative.
Good evening. Excuse me. Gabe Whitler, Odyssey Engineering. Here to present the Battleborn Football Soccer Complex. This is a request for a conditional use permit. I'm going to touch real briefly on the project itself. We've got a lot of technical stuff to get through as part of our request, and so I'm going to try and keep my presentation focused on that. But I would like to say this is a really special opportunity that our community is presented with to be able to bring professional level soccer here, offer opportunities to our youth that are currently not in this market, in this region. I feel that everybody's probably received a fair amount of positive feedback on this project, and I think it's fair to say that anyone who's looked at this can understand that this is a great opportunity for the region as well as our state. So with that, I'm gonna dive into the technical details of the project so we can get through that. So the project's located just south of Parr Boulevard. Here in yellow, this is Parr Boulevard, the jail. It's right along 395, and it's located slightly east and north of some residential with some significant buffering. The site's already been had a zone change with the previous project. Some of you might be familiar with a project that came through a couple of years ago for a hobby condo, very similar to what you just heard earlier this evening, but that project didn't come to fruition. So they did do the zone change to bring it into conformance with the master plan, which is also mixed employment. And the surrounding parcels still have a mixed use suburban designation. Hasn't been upgraded to the current master plan yet. This is the site overlaid on an aerial photo. Our boundary is here. This is Benny Lane. The site will take access via a public cul-de-sac. That cul-de-sac's already been mapped, offered for dedication with the previous project. It'll be constructed as part of this facility. You see the adjacent neighbors. Immediately adjacent are commercial, industrial type uses. The site's essentially vacant, undeveloped, with the exception of some grading that took place a number of years ago. Again, directly adjacent to 395. This is the actual right-of-way line here. There's a significant buffer between existing edge of oil and the right-of-way line. This would be the closest adjacent single family. It's actually, I believe, a mobile home park and a multifamily development to the west. There's a significant amount of vertical relief up to the apartments, and there's actually a ridge here, and these are located significantly lower than the proposed project. But it gives you an idea. There's also a significant encumbrance of NV Energy overhead power and easements that go along with that. So you're left with a fairly small amount of area on this parcel that you can build permanent structures. So as is consistent with this corridor and this utility network, things like walls, site work, parking, driveways, fences, that kind of thing are allowed in that. And so we've utilized some of that for parking and field layout. This is a landscape rendering of what the site will look like developed. We're going to use our tiered slope with walls for landscape buffering. It helps with not only get the site up higher than the freeway to create a visual buffer as you're looking into the site, but also to make up grade. We have significant grade to make up across the site, so we'll use tiered walls, parking, another tiered step, a clubhouse facility, a main field with bleacher system, and 2 secondary fields. And then we have some amenities, including futsal, which is a smaller version of soccer, and some pools, that sort of thing. So with our request in the mixed employment zoning district, we're requesting the use of a sports arena or stadium. That is a conditional use permit request. We also have grading with cuts deeper than 20 and fills greater than 10 feet, and this site triggers a hillside development. Not to make light of the hillside or the cuts and fills, but this is the third project that I can think of in the last number of years. It's had an approved entitlement for grading on this site, both for cuts and fills and hillside. This is a slope map calculation that we do that results in a density reduction, in this case, an open space requirement of 16.26 acres. The site is just over 30 acres when you include the public cul-de-sac, and 29 and a half acres of developed parcel. So of that total area, we currently have, and in the hillside calculation, you're allowed to count amenities, landscape, restored slopes. So that brings us to a total of 22 acres of open space, if you will. The calc is 16.26, and there's a condition addressing that we'll get to here in a little bit. Our total developed area, if you will, is about 7.5 acres, not including the amenities. Again, this is part of the hillside calculations, just depicting amenity, what went into that calculation of our 22 acres of open space. You have amenity areas in red. The light green is formal landscaped areas. The yellow would be restored slopes, a combination of landscaping, revegetation, slope stabilization, and then native open areas around the perimeter, obviously out. And these are the steeper zones of the site. They also are encumbered mostly by NV Energy infrastructure. This is, again, the overall site, just in a simple layout. So the site will include the 3 fields, the main field with up to a 5,000 seat capacity stadium is the goal. That number is mainly driven by Major League Soccer's requirements that you need to check a couple boxes in order to qualify for that style of event, in order to even be able to bring that type of entertainment to the area. Again, parking, the site was really dictated by the grade and what we could fit in here as far as parking goes, and we'll get into access and traffic counts here in a little bit, but this is the general overall layout. Another part of our request is the cuts and fills. The red is areas of greater than 20 feet of cut. Green is areas of greater than 10 feet of fill. While we're here, we'll touch on storm drainage. This is Ward 4, technically part of the North Valley's ward. So drainage is sensitive out there. I will mention this drains back to the Truckee River. It's not part of the closed basin drainage. We will be meeting our code requirements to mitigate increase in runoff caused by development. So there's really 3 NDOT basins that we need to mitigate. We're doing that with a series of ponds. Where we don't have room for an open pond that you're familiar with, we'll use an underground chamber system. It's basically an underground storm drain that provides volume, so you can mitigate for increase in flow rates. There's no requirement here for retention, since we don't drain to a closed basin. So we're just dealing with detention. And then we'll have another pond here just to make sure that we're not increasing any discharge to the downstream properties or NDOT right away. Our maximum cut will hit 46 feet back in this corner, and I think our max fill, it was about 33 feet. It's pretty consistent with the other projects that have come through. I don't recall exactly what those numbers were, but it takes significant grading to develop this site, and it's part of an original industrial park that we'll touch on a little later, but this part never got mass graded with that original property. So these cross sections show you, this would be looking north, a section through the site. So if you're 395 here, you hit the right of way, we'll have retaining walls with landscaping, parking, another tiered step in the parking, and then this would be the clubhouse facility, parking underneath, a step up to field level, and then a second level for all the amenities that go into the clubhouse facility. Field, scoreboard, the bleachers, stadium will be tucked back into the slope, and then some more walls to catch. The east-west section is pretty boring. It kind of follows the grade a little more gently, so that the main section of concern would be the east-west here. But it also does create this is a line of sight to give you an idea. If you're on the freeway trying to look up, you get buffered by landscaping and slope grading before you get there. This is an oblique of the area. The red is the parcel, just to kind of give you an idea of, you can start to make out that this is significantly higher. There's a grade and horizontal buffer between the residential uses. Again, there's a ridge here that protects this residential development, which is much lower than the existing site. These are just some renderings that were prepared prior to this project. Just large disclaimer, this is not site specific. It just kind of gives you an idea of what we're trying to put together on the site. Obviously, we had to rearrange things to make them site specific, and there's some conditions to make sure we're using neutral color palettes. That sort of thing. These are some rough elevations. The final building hasn't been developed, but this would be looking at the clubhouse from the freeway, parking underneath up to the field level, and then another level. This is looking at from the field at the clubhouse, and then a section of parking below, field level, and another level of amenities in the clubhouse. That is a concept of what the scoreboards will look like. There'll be one on either end of the main field. This is a kind of a summary of the proposed operations. This has been updated a little bit since we talked, but the main focus here I want to touch on is so this will host youth all the way up to professional soccer is the intent. And so, obviously youth soccer isn't going to drive much traffic. It's a typical operation. Kids practice games. There's, maybe high school level attendance. Where you get into the professional level, you can see that, you'll have a professional men's with 20 home games. You'll have a semi-professional men's with 10 to 15. Same for the women. So you can get up to upwards of 70 games pretty easily. And whether all of those trigger our special event requirement or not, we don't know exactly, but that'll bring us to a condition here shortly. So this is the overall site. The green is the original industrial park I mentioned. This is how the site fits into that. You notice that access, the bulk of the access comes off of Parr Boulevard down Benny Lane. There's also Parr Boulevard to Ferrari McLeod. So there's 2 points of access. The west court is being over-constructed at 40 feet wide. So it could technically be set up with some traffic control to allow 2 lanes in and then reversed at the end of the game for 2 lanes out, 1 lane in, that sort of thing. We've worked through this with the fire department. There's a secondary emergency access through the adjacent parcel, and they were okay with what we're proposing for access points. This is, again, as part of our application, we've included a traffic report. At about 2,000 seats, 2,000 people in attendance, it triggers level of service problems at this intersection, Parr Boulevard and Benny Lane. And so there will be some temporary traffic control needed for those larger events. So as part of our special event permit, anytime they've advanced ticket notice that they're going to be exceeding that threshold, they pull their special event permit and do the temporary traffic control for that style event. And then there's opportunities at these other intersections, but the current traffic report doesn't recommend that that's necessary. This is a letter from RTC, basic summary that they've reviewed it. They think our approach is a conservative. They're on board. And I just mentioned that because one of the conditions is a little more restrictive than we like to see. This is just proving that NDOT's going to do their widening and they don't need any additional right-of-way. They're about to break ground on this next phase and add an additional lane in both directions here. We also had a sound study conducted. Short story is the freeway already exceeds code level sound. They took a 6,000 seat event and modeled that into our site to prove that we're not making the noise condition any worse with the addition of this facility. So with that said, I'd just like to say thanks to staff for working with us to get us here. We do have a couple conditions that we'd like to amend, and as I understand it, another letter just came out this evening right before the meeting, which is modifying some of those conditions. So I'll let staff do their presentation, and then we can dive into those modified conditions. The primary condition is the limiting of 12 special events on this site. We're trying to word it so that there's non-sporting and there's sporting events. It's fine, non-sporting events, 12 a year, that seems reasonable. That seems in line with other special event venues around town. But if you limit the sporting events on the site, it's essentially a fatal flaw. You can't operate a professional level facility like this with 12 games a year if they're going to get to that level. So our traffic engineers here would love to give you some feedback if you have any questions on that. The applicants here is very passionate about this, and if you have any questions about the operations and what this means for our community, we'd love to speak as well. And thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that. Now a presentation from the city.
Okay, Jeff Foster, Associate Planner for the record. So here's LDC 2346, the Battleborn Football Club Complex. As Gabe was talking about, the site is approximately 30 acres in size. He mentioned the previous Westcourt Hobby Condos project that was approved along with the zone change back in 2021. Obviously never came to fruition. The current project includes 3 artificial turf soccer fields, a futsal court, pool, a clubhouse, arena-style bleacher seating for approximately 5,000, field lighting and parking. And the conditional use permit is specifically to allow development of a sports arena or stadium in the mixed employment zone, cuts deeper than 20 feet, fills greater than 10, hillside development. I would also point out that the applicant came in with a major deviation request regarding lighting. However, that was not necessary because code allows recreational facilities to exceed the standard lighting restrictions in the code. So that major deviation was ended up not moving forward. So the key issues are land use compatibility, hillside development, building and site design, operational impacts, and then where the rubber really hits the road, no pun intended, are traffic and public services. So we'll get to those at the end. Master plan and zoning map, mixed employment, as Gabe indicated. Regarding land use compatibility, the site is generally surrounded by commercial and light industrial uses, the residential uses to the west and south, Sierra Pacific Power Company, NV Energy land, and the freeway. The Bluffs apartment community is approximately 550 horizontal feet to the west and 150 vertical feet above the developed area for the proposed project. The Sun Villa mobile home community to the south is approximately 625 horizontal feet south and 60 feet below the developed area for the proposed project. Staff felt that the project is generally compatible with the surrounding land uses as a result of buffering in terms of the distances that I just talked about, the elevational differences, the topography, things along those lines. Also dealing with restrictions on operating hours as conditioned, as well as the fact that the ambient noise environment is already very loud, as indicated in the noise study. Regarding hillside development, some of the particulars are on the screen in terms of the amount of cuts and fills and the max cut and fill, and Gabe went over those numbers as well. The slopes greater than 3-to-1 are at the back of the site, and they're screened by the clubhouse. The future clubhouse stepped into the hillside, other amenities on the site, the parking areas and landscaping. And the applicant is proposing benched retaining walls generally between 10 and 15 max height. The hillside development further, as Gabe went through the numbers, 16.26 acres of required open space based on the slope analysis. They are proposing the 22.13 acres, and staff specifically requested this exhibit to show what was comprised, what went into those 22.13 acres. No need to spend any more time on that as he already presented that. Staff did include a condition, number 5, requiring the native open areas and the restored slope areas, so the dark green and the kind of the mustard color areas, to be preserved in perpetuity through deed restriction. Building and site design, you have your 3-story clubhouse. Again, the applicant went through those things. We did ask them to agree to condition number 7 regarding a neutral color palette to blend into the surrounding landscape as a result of one of the master plan policies, and the applicant agreed. We included condition number 8 to limit the visibility, to ensure limited visibility of the scoreboards. The applicant already proposed them on the ends of both ends of the primary field, the main field, but staff included condition 8 to make sure that that's where the scoreboards went, to limit the visibility from Highway 395. And then last but not least, regarding building and site design, we included condition number 9 to address access issues to the site, as RPD expressed interest in dealing with site issues from activities that they don't want to have to deal with up there. So closing the site down at night and having security cameras and things like that. Condition number 9 requires an operations and security plan to address their concerns. Regarding operational impacts, lighting, as I mentioned earlier, code allows recreational facilities such as parks and in this case the soccer complex to exceed things like the total amount of lighting on the site. There are some things that recreational facilities still have to address in terms of the angle of the lighting and whatnot. That's in code. We also included condition number 10 to conduct a glare impact analysis to make sure that the lighting that is proposed, even though it's being directed primarily onto the fields, that does not cause glare issues for the traveling public on Highway 395. And then we also included condition number 11 requiring turning off of the site lighting by a certain period or specified period of time, specified hour, to minimize impacts on the surrounding land uses. Regarding noise, again, the elevated noise environment due to the traffic on 395, the acoustic shielding that the applicant's representative talked about in terms of the topography, the hillside, et cetera, should provide ample shielding of the noise that's generated. And it is worth pointing out that the noise that is generated will generally be oriented towards the freeway, away from the residential uses that are above them to the west and to the below them to the south. As a result, the noise environment is not expected to exceed the existing ambient noise levels, and therefore it complies with RMC. And one last operational impact I wanted to address here is, again, RPD had concerns about the use on the site with 5,000 people, partaking, so to speak, and so they were concerned about having, issues there. So again, the operational and security plan that we required in condition number 12. Regarding traffic, and again, this is where things get a little sticky. So the LOS, the level of service during normal operations, is expected to be satisfactory. That's your Monday through Friday, peak hours. It shouldn't be a big deal because that's not when the big events would be happening on the site. However, the traffic is expected to be unsatisfactory during special events. And when I prepared the presentation, the traffic study had indicated that 5,000 was the threshold for when the project would have a significant impact regarding traffic and degradation of level of service. However, the applicant prepared and submitted a revised traffic letter yesterday, I believe, that reduced that count to 2115, and that's the number that Gabe mentioned a few minutes ago. So at that point, that's when the intersection that he highlighted, the Parr Boulevard and Benny Lane intersection would be expected to degrade to unsatisfactory levels. At that point, temporary traffic control measures would be necessary to keep traffic moving. Staff had concerns, significant concerns with the traffic study that was prepared by the applicant, and as a result had condition number 13 requiring a peer review, in effect a separate traffic study. And that will come up later when I talk about the proposed changes to the conditions of approval that you have before you. Essentially, staff is now recommending to go back to the condition number 13 as originally worded, requiring the peer review of the traffic study. It's also worth pointing out that NDOT at the 11th hour, unfortunately, came in and has requested additional review of the traffic study as well. They have concerns about the existing study. Condition number 14. This is the condition requiring limiting the number of special events, which would again be triggered by the unsatisfactory traffic levels, requiring the temporary traffic control measures, limiting those to 12 events per year. The reason that that number came about is a couple of things. One is staff did not feel it was appropriate to give the applicant effectively a blank check and a clean slate, whatever analogy you want to use, for an unlimited number of special events where the traffic would be degraded such that traffic control measures would be necessary. So we proposed 12 per year, on average one a month. They could be 12 consecutive weekends, it doesn't matter. But 12 special event permits per year, whether they would be sporting or non-sporting events. The other reason that 12 is staff's recommendation is because the building code has thresholds for the restrooms. The applicant has proposed one tiny restroom building next to the primary field, and the building official has indicated that the building, that the city will need more restrooms in order to approve, the use and whatnot. So the 12 special events per year was kind of the threshold that the building official had in terms of the wastewater issue. And I'm going to get to that on the next slide. So regarding the wastewater issue, the existing sanitary sewer system in the area is over 50% capacity. The applicant has proposed at least one permanent restroom indicated in the circled area there on the screen, and potentially additional restrooms in phases down the road. The special event permitting process would require portable restroom facilities to be addressed through that special event permitting process. But again, staff did not feel it was appropriate to basically just allow portable restrooms ad nauseum for every special event, from now until eternity, that there needed to be some additional actual bathrooms installed. And on top of that, you have the sewer system capacity issue. And so we proposed condition number 15 to require that sewer system improvements necessary to serve the project be completed prior to COVO on the clubhouse. Before you are the recommended findings and the recommended motion, and I'm available for questions. Oh, just kidding. Okay, should we talk about the amended conditions?
Yes, please.
Okay. So the applicant submitted yesterday a request for revisions to 7 conditions. We prepared a memo and it was sent out to you today via email as well as given to you here. Staff concurs with the request to modify conditions 2, 5, 16, and 17 as explained below. Basically going with the applicant's recommendations or requested modifications to the conditions 2, 5, 16, and 17. And the justifications for those revisions are in the document in front of you. The condition that we are no longer recommending a revision to is the traffic report. As I alluded to earlier, in terms of staff is recommending now the full peer review traffic study to be conducted. And so those are the changes. There were a couple that we previously did not agree with, the primary one being the limitation on the number of special events. to the, in condition number 14, the maximum 12 that we proposed. And then condition number 15, the applicant's requested reference or change modification was unnecessary. So those are the changes.
Thank you. All right, we'll now move to the commissioners for disclosures. Commissioner Velto, why don't you kick it off again, buddy?
Commissioner Velto, familiar with the site, received and reviewed emails in support as well as from the city staff. And I believe that is all.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Gower?
Thank you, Commissioner Gower. Familiar with the site and received and read correspondence.
Commissioner Armstrong, I'm familiar with the site and I read and received emails.
Commissioner Johnson, familiar with the site, received and read emails, and met with the applicant and the applicant's representative.
Commissioner Draculich, read and received emails and familiar with the site. All right, we will now open it up to public comment. Michelle, I don't have any requests to speak forms over here. Do we have everybody on Zoom or anything over on your side?
I did not receive any requests to speak forms. We did receive correspondence. There was 110 in favor of the project, 2 were opposed. We did receive a voicemail. All correspondence was forwarded to the Planning Commission and have been entered into the record. And I don't know if we have anybody on Zoom. No, nobody on Zoom is raising their hand, so we'll transition into the voicemail if you're ready.
Thank you, please do.
Hi, this is Joni Hammond. I was calling in support of the soccer stadium proposal that is going to be voted on by the City Council in next week. Please vote yes. I think it's something that will enhance our entire community. It will also bring money into the community instead of the soccer folks going out of the community over to Sacramento. It'll allow spectators and participants to enjoy ourselves in a field that we don't have. Please vote yes. Thank you.
Okay, and that's it for public comment.
Okay, thank you. Anybody in the chambers wish to speak on public? Okay, please, sir. When you're done speaking, please fill out a request to speak form. Thank you. And state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes.
My name's Jared Souther. I serve on the Ward 4 Neighborhood Advisory Board, and I live in the North Valleys. I also am in hospitality. I work for Marriott. And I feel it's important to recognize that there's a need for soccer fields. But the concern that I bring to you is transportation. Park Boulevard interchange, currently I don't think it has lights. I don't go to the jail, so I'm not sure. But then they're also planning to do the Sun Valley Connector and bring traffic from Sun Valley into Park Boulevard and add more traffic there entering into the 395 with additional enhancements at interchange. My concern would be ease of access into that parking lot for buses, because if they're bringing sports teams in and not having soccer moms bring all the kids in, the other thing would be, is there going to be sidewalks that will allow for youth to walk safely in and out of that neighborhood? And is there an RTC bus that would allow kids to ride into that community? Those are the things I've observed in hearing the Neighborhood Advisory Board meeting and then tonight as well. I think that they want to fill every field, that they want to be able to bring families and teams to enjoy a great experience. But the limited amount of access in and out, it's great to have reversible traffic, but as I see traffic going to TMCC in the morning or at other time events, it backs up onto the freeway. Yes, they're adding longer merge lanes and things that will happen, but at some point there's going to be a bottlenecking. That's what I see right now. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else in the chambers wish to speak? Okay, seeing none, we will close public comment and move to the commissioners for questions of the applicant or staff.
I think my question is going to be for staff or maybe specifically the engineer, but we've heard some, I think, appropriate concerns around traffic, particular Ward 4. are those going to be illuminated through this peer-reviewed traffic study? Like, what are the parameters that it would actually address? Will it dictate whether or not you need an additional traffic light or accommodating access for certain types of vehicles, like a busing, given the nature of the complex?
So in general, Mike Michelle is going to speak to the issue as well, but in general, the report deals with when traffic controls would be necessary, i.e. temporary traffic control measures, not necessarily full-scale improvements. So, Mike, do you?
Good evening, Mike Michelle, Engineering Manager for the record. I think this is a great project, but traffic is a concern. There's been some flux in the traffic study that was prepared. I have an awful lot of respect for the traffic engineer that prepared the study, but at the end of the day, I think given the unique characteristics of this project, it's a one-off. There are unique assumptions that are made in the traffic study. And again, nothing against the traffic engineer. It's a unique project. I think we should have a third-party peer review of the study. And I will say that when I say peer review, that would be also looked at by NDOT. NDOT has concerns of this project with the 395 northbound PAR intersection, and I'm quite sure that they would have concerns with the temporary traffic control that would be offered in these special events at the intersection of PAR and Benny. Because if you have an all-way stop there, there could be some backup on the on-ramp and off-ramps. So when I say third-party review, that would be at the sole discretion of our administrator, who that person would be. I would expect that to be paid by the applicant, and I would expect that the administrator will not approve this study unless NDOT's concerns are addressed. And it would take into account all the stuff that you mentioned. It would also take into account what is the threshold for a special event. I don't know. I don't know that. I cannot give you an answer to that. I know somebody said 2,100. That number came up yesterday. I don't know what that number is, but we would have to come up with that number. And that's something that would need to be studied. I would also expect this traffic study to address line of sight issues at PAR and Benny. I think there's a line of sight issue making a left turn southbound. I would expect that to be studied as well, just in full disclosure to all who are listening tonight.
Please, go ahead.
Quick follow-up to that. So if NDOT is not satisfied in the manner that you described, would that then trigger something beyond temporary traffic control? Does it compel a more permanent infrastructure solution to that for the project to move forward, or is that outside of the scope of what we're looking at? How does that actually work?
That's a tough question. There is no traffic signal today at 395 in the PAR exit. I know that there is a project, the Dandini project that was approved some years ago that was required to put in a traffic signal. Would this project trigger a traffic signal there? That's kind of a tough question to answer. I don't know the answer to that. I know that NDOT will have an opportunity to provide comments. And I know that backup onto the 395 is something that is just not acceptable. I don't care whose project it is.
Thank you. I appreciate your commentary there.
Fellow commissioners, if I may, where we're talking about traffic, maybe just enlighten me a little bit more. This question is for the applicant. I kind of just want to get a better understanding of what we'd expect. I kind of understand we're tackling the bigger events, but also, what are we going to see Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and what's a busy month? Like, what are you guys expecting there? I just kind of want to give you a chance to talk about exactly what we'd see, kind of baked inside of what they're discussing right now, if you can.
Certainly, I'm going to turn it over to our traffic engineer to address that, if that's okay.
My name is Christopher Moltz, PE. I'm with West Tex Consulting Engineers. I did the traffic study. So there's a lot of concerns with the traffic that I think if everyone read the traffic study in full, I think would be addressed. I understand there's a lot of information coming in, and it's, with all the attachments, it's probably like 50 pages. But most of these concerns have been addressed. We did use RTC traffic model into 2050, which that does take into account future projects and future improvements. So all of that's based on the 2050 planning schedule. So I know there's concerns about, what about the future projects from Dandini that should be taken into account into the 2050 traffic model by RTC, which was used for projecting future growth. So let's see. I would like to note that the 2,155 seats was based on the 2050 traffic, which is going to produce higher levels of traffic than current. So hopefully between today, which is 2023, and 2050, that'll be enough learning curve to adjust for that time frame. RTC, Swan Wang, PE, and PhD, she did review it. They said that because we're using weekday trips, it would be conservative. One second. I don't have a problem with working with City of Reno and NDOT to perform additional analysis. I just think it's a little bit unorthodox to get a third-party review, especially in terms of time and effort. I already have a traffic software that's there, so for me to make changes is really easy and do all the what-if scenarios that City of Reno or NDOT wants, but to hand that over to someone else, it kind of is working backwards. Yesterday I had a 30-minute phone call with Tom Landry of the City of Reno. One of the assumptions that seemed to be a big issue was I assumed that during the peak hour, most of the traffic would be coming in. 70% of that was coming in and 30% out. It is the opposite of what the ITE shows, but the reason is it was midday peak hour, and I assumed that most traffic would be coming in. In order to appease that request, I reverse calculated the volumes, once again, under 2050, and level of service improved when we did an outflow instead of an inflow from the site. And the reason for that is when you have that left turn, that can't go with traffic, but if you have right turn, most of the traffic is going to turn right onto Parr Boulevard and onto 395. Most of that traffic can coincide with, you'll see gaps and make turns. You need a lot more of a headway and space to make that left turn into the site. There are issues existing. I don't know if you've ever been on Parr Boulevard at rush hour, if any commissioners have or not. It backs up onto the freeway. For that reason, I specifically requested, hey, we can't do special events, probably within 1 hour of rush hour on weekdays, because it's not going to help the situation at all. But during Saturday, it's really not bad. Any congestion issues, I think, are from, is there an aerial of the bridge or the roadway over 395? I don't know if that's available?
We'll
Sorry.
bring it up just,
Okay.
in just a second.
So the issue with that is, and the reason traffic backs up is you have people coming from Sun Valley and TMCC, and they want to go south onto 395.
You can use the mouse as a pointer.
Oh, I can? Okay. Okay, so you have TMCC over here, Dandini turns into Parr. Everyone here, there's a roundabout over here. It's actually faster if you get off the freeway here and make a right and go around the roundabout and come back. So you could tell I've driven it a lot. The issue is people here want to turn left onto the freeway, but all the people from Parr Boulevard, there's no control here. So everyone from Parr Boulevard free flows and prevents these people from turning left, and there's not a separate left turn lane that's long enough here. And this backs up here because everyone wants to turn left south at rush hour, but everyone from Parr Boulevard's turning right. They're not able to do it. So really most of the access issues are the bridge, not Parr Boulevard itself. And during a special event, we won't have these people coming out of TMCC, getting off work, turning left, blocking the intersection here. Everyone would be coming in all the way down here to the left. And that's why I kind of left it open-ended. I just said, hey, it's failing. We need temporary traffic controls. I want the city of Reno to review it. I want them to approve the traffic control plan for the event, but I don't think those semantics need to be sorted out at this phase rather than city of Reno needs to review it. City of Reno needs to approve the traffic control plan. RTC is good with it. We haven't heard back from NDOT yet. I think if the commissioners have any questions for me directly, that would be great.
Commissioner Guy, I kind of feel like I jumped in. If you want to keep going in on the traffic, I guess if I go back to the applicant, I was trying to get a better understanding of what we're seeing outside of the bigger events, and I appreciate what you said, but understanding, so my kiddo's in soccer, and I go to all these fields, and they are very busy on a Wednesday, and they pack the kids, and so I kind of wanted to get a better understanding of what we're seeing on a typical week in June that is not a major event, because I think that kind of bakes it in my
minimal
decision-making.
impacts.
And what are you expecting? A lot of practices and just some games?
Yeah.
I mean, what does the schedule look like?
Practices, correct.
And are we having outside of the MLS or professional events? Are we bringing in clubs from out of the state and having 60 teams playing at once? I mean, I understand that probably has a lot to do with the success of this complex. Is bringing in outside events, which this community definitely needs. I'd love to see, but those are bigger events too. I've been in those parking lots. It gets a little crazy when there's 50 teams playing on a Saturday and Sunday.
Thank you. My name is Mark Radow. Can you hear me? Okay. My name is Mark Radow. I'm the applicant, the developer. You have to keep in mind that there's just 3 fields. So these are not mega tournament events, but you're exactly correct. The draw, I think, let me just unravel and unpack some of the things that you've experienced and some of the things that we're looking at. But at the youth sport level, all we have are 3 fields, and there's a limited amount of volume that can be, people that can be using 3 fields at any given time, okay? So we don't expect there to be that much traffic. I think at that particular level, the emphasis is on the family experience. So when you bring your son or daughter to soccer practice, that there's a clubhouse with amenities for you, whether if you want to work out, have a coffee, open up your laptop, that you're not trapped in your car using a porta potty as your amenity. So something for the family to go to enjoy. So that's a instrumental aspect of this facility. Part of the catalyst for families to pursue this sport of soccer is the pathway from when they are children and they aspire to be stars someday. Maybe it's through college, maybe it's to be a professional. And right now, Reno does not offer anything in that regard. The team currently, there's some athletes in the back. They play in the U.S. Open Cup. They compete at the very highest level of the U.S. Open Cup. That's the most prestigious tournament in North America. There is not a facility in Northern Nevada that qualifies for a game at that level. The number of bleachers, controlled access, the quality of the field, Reno doesn't have a field even for that level. So we were forced to beg and borrow to allow us to have a home game down in Douglas at one of the high schools down there. But a typical high school doesn't qualify for a U.S. Open Cup game. So because we don't have the facility, we don't have a team. We don't have that North Star. It's a Christmas tree without a star at the top. And what happens there is that the most aspiring students that are athletes, they want to go to college or they want to go to become professional, they all have to leave our community. They have to go somewhere else. And if you've ever been an outsider trying to get in, that's a very difficult scenario to be in. You've made the track of the path fantastically more difficult when you always have, when you're from Northern Nevada and now you have to be an outsider. You're the best here, but your dreams are going to get crushed because you're trying to take someone else's job in an out-of-town situation. This opportunity brings that North Star right into our community. The state of Nevada doesn't even have a professional grade soccer field. Las Vegas, who just got the Las Vegas Raiders, Las Vegas, who is now getting $1 billion, another $1 billion to bring the Oakland A's to Las Vegas. They even have the Eiffel Tower, for crying out loud. I've seen it, trust me, it's there. We in Northern Nevada, I've lived here for 40 years. We don't have sorry. We drive the best here away.
Mr. Chairman, while Mr. Radar composes himself, and I appreciate the passion that you bring to the project in your vision. And I think just following up on the Vice Chairman's question, I think what we're trying to understand a little bit more is the nuts and bolts of your vision and how that plays out on a kind of a daily basis at the facility in terms of how many people are going to be there. You talked a little bit about only being 3 fields, and that can only accommodate so many people. I understand that, but we've heard these various numbers: 5,000 people, 2,000 people.
Sure.
Can you talk to us a little bit about kind of that spectrum of events that could potentially occur there?
Absolutely. Thank you, Commissioner Gowler. The use Monday through Friday is for kids and families in a club. We would expect maybe 1,000 families to be members of the club and utilize the facility, and kids, moms and dads using the facility. And they would rotate through a few times a week into the facility, generally after school. There's ideas that we could incorporate academy level quality where kids that could actually play soccer during the day and then go to school afterwards. So there's that sort of use, but that just kind of balances out the flow of what we're doing there. I don't really see that as, that's not a spectator-driven activity. None of these are spectator-driven activities. Weekends, we plan on having youth leagues, the very youngest kids, 4, 5, 6, 10 years old, looking to participate in the sport. These are not spectator-driven activities. These are user-driven activities for families to come enjoy the project, and those are not going to. The facility will look more empty than full. To be fair, okay. The reason for the big numbers, the 5,000, I didn't make that number up. The U.S. Soccer Federation dictates to us how big the facility has to be. It's not generated by us. If you don't have a facility that has 5,000 people, you cannot have a professional soccer team. It's that simple. Okay, and right now, the number of 21, now I don't know if we're gonna have a sellout. I'd love to have a sellout. I hope you guys come. I'd love to have especially Mark, I know he's a soccer player. But the number below 5,000 is just, you don't have a sold out soccer stadium. And we'd like to have a sold out soccer stadium for the men and for the women. We plan on having a women's professional soccer team too. And where this really comes, like the frequency of this is that in order to start the season, the very first question that you're asked is, tell us about your facility. And if you don't, check box number 1, how many people fit in your facility? Check box number 2, is it controlled access? So it's all about the facility. But if you don't get past check box 1, 5,000 seats, you don't pass go.
So assuming you get to that, you get the facility, it has the capacity that's required to check that box. What is your vision for semi-professional, professional events? What is the frequency of those type of events? Are we talking
excellent
12, 20, 50?
Excellent question. Certainly. So on the men's side, it's a 40-game season, 20 games away, 20 games at home. So that's a minimum of 20 in-season games for the men's professional soccer.
With the potential for how many spectators?
Potential for 5,000.
Okay.
Okay. On the women's side, also 5,000, same scenario, 40 game season, 20 home, 20 away, and the potential for up to 5,000. Now we would know well in advance when we hit that because it's an online ticketing system that tells you, well, how many season tickets you have, how many tickets have you sold, and, is it going to get triggered or not, but then in the semi-professional level, maybe we don't trigger 5,000 people, but because this is a community and this is the biggest city in the world, and because of the following that this sport has, and everybody is looking to have their children step up the ladder, well, the way to step up the ladder is that semi-professional team, the second team. Well, maybe the ambition is to have a full stadium for the second team too, because they're the kids that grew up here to playing here and competing here.
And talk to me about what the semi-professional team looks like.
Those are a little less. You have maybe 15 home games and 15 away games. Those seasons are broken up a little bit. You don't have to participate in those every single time, but generally you're expecting for 15 home games and 15 away games. I think I didn't really say this, but then you have, and you have that on the men's and the women's side too. So potentially between men and women semi-professional, you've got 15 and 15. On the full professional, you have 20 and 20. That's the regular season. Then you could have, if the team does well and you go to postseason and you're in the playoffs and the city should be celebrating this, we have to provide the facility to do this. So that's where the frequency comes from. But outside of the semi-professional sport, and the professional sport, it's more of a community park, but you've got to be able to provide that North Star too. With soccer, the sport, and all the kids invest and the families investing their time, their money from 6 years old all the way through high school. I don't know if you guys have kids or not, but it's a commitment. But it's a commitment that's a dead end if you can't provide that thing called pathway. And that's what this facility is going to do.
Understood. You know, the questions that we're asking and the conversation that we're having are not necessarily contradictory to what you're talking about in the need for the facility. I mean, I think you've really demonstrated clearly in the comments that we've received from the community really demonstrate the need and the opportunity that we have with this facility. What we're tasked with is making sure that the facility is compatible with the community, with our code, that we have the infrastructure to support it. So that's why I'm asking kind of specific questions.
Well, Commissioner Gower,
I want to ask one more specific question, and then I'm going to turn it back over to the chairman. I want to ask, with the semi-professional games, what does the spectator turnout look like for those events?
We've had as many as 500 people show up to a game in Douglas High School.
Okay.
And that's asking people from Reno to go down there. Okay. And there's a lot of guys that said, and families said, I can't make it because it's too far away. So, but I'd like to comment on something you brought up, Commissioner Gower. I've lived here for 40 years. I've seen Reno grow fantastically. I drive north and south and east and west in Reno every day, just like you guys do. There's no more land. And I was speaking to a prominent business hospitality person. I won't share his name, but his comment, I think, you'll find striking. As I told him the story that I was basically telling you, he said, you know what you should do, Mark? You should take your soccer complex and put it out in the middle of the desert where nobody cares. And I thought to myself, man, you don't get it. You're talking about families that moms and dads, soccer moms, dads that have to show up every day after week, and they don't want to go to a place where nobody cares. You don't want to take the thing that could be the energy of our community. What defines our city right now? I mean, I go skiing in Tahoe. I love Mount Rose, and I mean, I raised my family here, but I got choked up because I had to send my family away.
We appreciate you, Mr. Adams, very much. What you're saying is very sincere, and there's no doubt about what you're saying. Let us kick it back for some more questions so we can keep the conversation going on some key topics. I'm going to give a chance to Commissioner Velta, who gets lost a little bit virtually. Did you have any questions right now, my friend?
I don't, but I've appreciated the line of questionings and the response from the applicant.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mike, I want to follow up on just a couple things to try to understand. So I thank you for the explanation in terms of the condition in that. I guess what I'm trying to wrap my head around is I understand this concern about the traffic study and everybody wanting to review it. But I guess what I'm also trying to understand is how whatever the findings are from that traffic study are fitting into what we typically are dealing with here, which is a level of service based on peak hour traffic. And as I understand it, and by your admission, everybody's admission, we are not dealing with peak hour traffic here. We are dealing with, weekends. We are dealing with evenings. We are not dealing with a peak hour time that is going to show level of service dropping below acceptable at 8 o'clock in the morning. So I guess what I'm trying to understand is if we do this peer review and it says, hey, there's traffic concerns that are happening when 5,000 occupants are attempting to leave this site, I guess I'm trying to understand how the city is going to treat this differently than when every ACES game gets out, or when every UNR game gets out, or when any other large events happen on a very regular and very known basis that create traffic situations far and above the levels that we're looking at. So certainly we've not dealt with any of that. So I'm trying to understand how the city is proposing to implement the findings of this traffic study when we are talking about upwards of, potentially 70 events, assuming they are all sold out across the span of a year, that are going to create traffic issues for 30 minutes on both sides of the event, and how that is going to be either impacting this project or conditioning this project. Because I don't understand from the staff report and from the request from the peer review what exactly we're looking at here. We're addressing that there's a concern, but I don't see a path forward for addressing that concern. See where I'm going with that? So I'm trying to understand where you're going with this.
Thank you for the question. Mike Michelle, engineering manager, for the record. Well, that is a reason for, this is a unique project. That's the reason for the peer review, is especially to set that threshold number for a special event permit. And the stuff that you're talking about comes out of the special event permit. It's a totally separate process wherein there are folks here at the city that review these applications and that set special conditions like flaggers. And those flaggers could be at the off-ramp. Those flaggers they will certainly be at the intersection of Parr and Benny. They would set conditions of temporary traffic control. But it's their job, the special event committee, to come up with those conditions. We all have been to ACES games. We see the flaggers there. We see the special traffic signal conditions that are put on. There's a number of ways that this sort of stuff can get mitigated, but, we need to have a threshold. What is it?
So I appreciate that, and I think this is where, I guess, my line of questioning is going. So we're asking for a peer review to establish a threshold when we identify that the existing traffic patterns are not appropriate.
Correct.
And then separate from that, so that's a requirement, is they have to identify that. And then separate from that, there is a requirement, and it's not a condition, but it's a requirement that they would be looking at a special use or a special event permit for that, which is independent of anything that we see. It deals with those things that you were talking about. So if the third-party peer review gives a recommendation for what that is, and the applicant is able to provide that, and we've had discussions about that at other events, if the applicant is able to provide that and willing to provide that, why are we limiting that to 12 times a year?
That's not my, that's somebody else.
Okay,
That's somebody else to answer that. That's a building official issue.
Okay, so, and I'll ask Jeff to come back up. Thank you for explaining the peer review process to me, so I appreciate that. So Jeff, if you can come up, because I know from what I heard in your presentation, there were two issues with this special event concern. The first one is traffic control, and the second one is essentially restroom facilities.
Correct.
Okay, and so as I understand it, from a building code standpoint, the building official is going to look at this with an occupancy based on the bleachers as part of the overall build out. I see the bleachers aren't expected until the third phase of this project. So there won't be 5,000 people there until the third phase of the project.
Correct.
So when those bleachers are constructed, I fully suspect that the building that's not designed yet would also include facilities to accommodate that. So back to my question, it seems like there's everything in place for the special event permit to address the traffic and the building department to address the restroom issue. So why are we limiting it to 12 times a year?
So Jeff Foster, Associate Planner for the record. So back to the overall theme here. As you point out, Commissioner Johnson, the project can go forward with the fields, the flat fields, right? The fields, the futsal court, the pool, things like that, without having any traffic impacts. that would trigger the traffic controls. So that's the peer review of the traffic study would move the analysis down the road in terms of when those actual special event permit requirements would take place. So staff is not recommending or suggesting that the commission not approve the project. What we're simply saying is that with regard to traffic, we feel that a peer review of the traffic study is important to establish the actual threshold, whether it's 2115 as came out yesterday, 900, 3850, we have no idea. So what we're asking for is a peer review of the traffic study to establish an accurate threshold at which special event traffic controls would be necessary. So that deals with the traffic. The theory, the staff's thinking here, and this is setting aside the building official discussion with regard to the restrooms, because as you point out, that can be addressed through the permitting process. The number 12 came from that as having some kind of a number. Instead of 0 to infinity, right, we wanted to have some kind of a number for you to chew on as to what was appropriate in terms of allowing a degradation of level of service such that traffic controls, temporary traffic controls are necessary. And that number that we recommended was 12. It happens to tie into the building code issue with regard to the restrooms and versus porta potties. But we felt that having a number, a lower number, was appropriate in order to not effectively impact the community out there essentially an infinite number of times. I mean, I'm exaggerating for emphasis, correct? But the 70 times, is it 70? Is it 38? You know, that's up to you to decide, right? So
I guess, and I appreciate that, and I think that makes perfect sense, and it's a good discussion for us to have, but I'm just trying to maybe just go back to understanding if everything is put in place based on the results of the traffic report, the third-party study, and everything is put in place to identify what measures need to be taken, and the applicant agrees to do all of that, and by all accounts would have to ask for that special event every single time. There's not a blanket special event thing. None of that's happening here. I guess I'm still trying to understand what, the magic number of 12, if all of the other conditions are met, then the issues that are potentially creating the problem, in theory, are being mitigated based on all these other conditions. So you say that, you're trying to give us a number to know for sure, but at the same time, we're also saying that that's based on making sure that everything's already addressed. So that's why I guess I'm just trying to understand if there was something specific to 12, or if it was just, as you say, a number for us to.
It was a number to chew on, and the context that yes, in theory, the traffic can be mitigated through temporary traffic controls, flaggers. And by the way, those flaggers have to be certified, and it's the whole, they can't hire their cousins kind of a thing. So the staff was concerned on behalf of the motoring public and the people that live in the adjacent residential uphill from the site, essentially trying to limit the amount of times that they are potentially affected via inconvenience, traffic controls, things like that.
Okay, thank you. I can appreciate that. And I guess then just the last follow-up to that is if we go through and this is approved with a condition in there for 12, and certainly hearing from the applicant, there's a desire to build this, and it's the number that's max is not being driven by current experience with these events. It's being driven by a third-party entity. So it seems like there's certainly some room for growth to get to that point. But if we set a limit at 12 or 15 or 20 or 70 or whatever that number is, and they reach a point where that is something that they are going to exceed, what is the process? Do they have to come in and amend this conditional use permit similar to what we heard earlier this evening?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Commissioner Velto, do you want to chime back in?
No, thank you. Not right now.
Okay. Commissioner Gower.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, question for staff. So we see on projects that generate traffic, required improvements to intersections. Why was that not considered as part of this?
So I will obviously defer to the experts on traffic in general, but I did want to point out that NDOT in their 11th hour email to me yesterday indicated that, as I believe Mike Michelle indicated as well, that the intersection, the off-ramp, the Parr Boulevard 395 interchange is eventually planned to be signalized, or is planned to be signalized. So that part of the overall situation is already in the works, so to speak, right? But as far as kind of other improvements that might be necessary, I will certainly defer to engineering staff on that.
Thank you. Mike, the specific question is opportunities for intersections and intersection improvements, particularly at Parr and Benny, that would mitigate some of the concerns that we're talking about and potentially reduce the number of special permit requirements, special event permit requirements because of traffic at that intersection?
Mike Michelle, engineering manager, for the record. I would expect the traffic study, this final study, to address that particular issue, especially line of sight issue. And if that final traffic study shows that there's a line of sight issue, I would expect improvements to be made. I would expect this applicant to make those improvements. I would expect that if the level of service at that intersection was absolutely unreasonable, meaning it's F and F and F, that something be done at that intersection. It could be right in, right out. But there's a number of things that could come out of that final traffic study. And again, given the unique nature of this project, I ask respectfully that it be peer reviewed.
And I guess, Mike, I don't know if this is, it's probably more into discussion, but a question for you. I mean, it's a little bit unorthodox. I understand it's a little bit different project than we normally see. A lot of times to make a decision on issuing a conditional use permit, we have that type of information available to inform our decision. So I guess I'm a little bit concerned with the results of a third-party study essentially being conditioned and then just moving forward from there versus getting the results of that study and having it come back to the commission to inform our decision.
I understand what you're saying.
Jeff Foster, Associate Planner, for the record. Commissioner Gower, I think the conundrum staff found ourselves in is when we were evaluating this application, we asked for a waiver of time in order to have additional vetting of things like the traffic, sewer, et cetera, et cetera. That waiver of time was not granted by the applicant, and we were requested to move forward as quickly as possible. So as a result, some things like the traffic study effectively got kicked down the road. And it's an unfortunate situation because, as you point out, that's not the normal protocol. But we were not given the opportunity to make sure that everything was addressed with the documentation that we had on hand when we were requested to move forward with the staff report and bring it before you tonight. As a result, we crafted conditions that we felt limited the city's exposure and put proper precautions in place with caveats and clawbacks and things like that, where we could make sure that essentially if you approve the project tonight, that you're not left with something down the road that is not satisfactory. So that's why the peer review traffic study was effectively conditioned to then happen at a future point in time. Thankfully, because it's not required for the use of the fields, the initial use of the fields, this isn't something that timing-wise is absolutely critical, and we'll have some time to work through the details.
And so I have a, if I could, Mr. Chairman, a related question on that point. So what would be the requirement? Would a conditional use permit be required if this didn't have a stadium component to it? If it was just 3 fields with some amenities?
It would for the cuts and fills and the hillside development.
Right, but not for an arena stadium.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Then I mean, I understand the applicant is moving forward because you want to have the approval in hand to demonstrate to whoever is the organization that you have this facility approval in place. But, you know, we're faced with this conundrum, as you point out, Jeff, that we don't really have the information that I feel is necessary to make an informed decision on the traffic. There's the opportunity to essentially move forward with the approval of the project minus the stadium component, and there's no traffic issues there, and come back for a secondary conditional use permit for the arena and the stadium piece, right? Is that an option?
I suppose,
Once we
yes.
have more information?
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to get clarification on that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Gower.
Mr. Chairman, I just have one other unrelated to traffic question.
Please, go ahead.
I didn't see signage come up in the staff report at all, and I'm curious what the signage limitations are.
So the ME zone, as far as wall signage, allows a certain amount of wall signage based on the gross floor area of the building. And so there would be, and I don't know, unfortunately, I don't know the numbers specifically, but it would be based on the GFA, the gross floor area of that clubhouse, the 30,000, approximately 30,000 square feet. So there would be a certain amount of wall signage that would be allowed. They're also allowed a monument sign. And so that would also be proposed. The applicant, I know, provided information to us on what they were proposing, but we didn't look at it at a kind of a building permit level, figuring that that would be addressed at the building permit phase. So yeah, it wasn't, it didn't rise to the level of you know, needing to address at the staff report level, we felt. So anyway, does that answer the question?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I have no visual necessarily of what the signage could look like in terms of square footage. I'm assuming there's no digital signage, or would digital be allowed?
So whatever code allows is what the applicant would propose, and we would permit as allowed by code. So that's why I'm saying we didn't analyze it at a level of what you would eventually analyze at the building permit phase.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I follow up on
Please,
that?
go ahead.
Just, this was tied to a condition sort of as well as where Commissioner Gower was going with that. I see the condition about the building having the colors that blend in with the native area, but I'm also looking at this, and I'm thinking about this idea of the clubhouse and the main field and everything else. Is the idea of that condition intended to mitigate any visual concerns from off-site? And I guess where I'm going with is, if you're on the field or you're in the bleachers and you're looking at what is proposed as a clubhouse that's not facing the street, and I'm envisioning that there's team branding, there's colors, there's signage, there's advertisements, there's all of those things that are facing the field and not the highway. Where does that fit in this, both this condition about the colors and this potential signage issue, if they're not visible from any place off-site?
So traditionally, non-marketing based signage, if you will, right? If it's internal to a site, is not considered as signage regulated by the code. I think it's a little bit up in the air as to whether or not, I think one of the graphics shown was the scoreboard. and, some kind of advertising on the scoreboard. It's a little bit up in the air as to whether or not that would be considered signage. And I don't have a firm answer on that. It's not something we've had to deal with all that often.
I guess I was picturing it almost like the inside of a high school football field where all of the sponsors have their signs ringing around in there, and that never seems to be an issue. So that would be something that I just want to make sure that we're not conditioning out because of this requirement for the color or something else, that the opportunity for that sort of on-site advertising and branding internal to the facility is not going to run afoul of the conditions that you're presenting.
Fair enough. I appreciate the question and the line of reasoning there. No, the condition was with regard to visual from 395, and it's maybe mitigating things, but also just making it blend, in effect mitigating it by making it blend into the environment a little bit better. And that came specifically as a result of my master plan conformance analysis and looking for policies and goals that supported the project. And that was one where there was an opportunity for the project to incorporate, design elements, the color palette, reflecting on the master plan and conformance there.
Okay. And then, Mr. Chair, if I may,
Please,
one more unrelated question. Just wanted to clarify, there were some questions about condition number 2, which is looking at some of the phasing based on sewer improvements. And I think I'm understanding it, but is the intent that we're eliminating, since there's a condition about providing the off-site sewer requirements that are required based on the final build-out of the facility, that, just again, trying to make sure I'm understanding, you're essentially giving the opportunity to extend the timeline based on those improvements being completed, and or not requiring that those improvements are completed, in the timeline that was originally conditioned. Is that a fair statement? Sorry, the areas that they may not have control over with some of those improvements that may take longer than the initial condition time, these modifications that are proposed and acceptable to the city are essentially incorporating that into the conditions to allow for that sewer capacity to increase beyond what would be the normal 18 or 36 months.
That is correct, yes. Yeah, just trying to work with the applicant to give them the additional opportunity to extend the conditional use permit. Sorry, the conditional use permit, if approved with the recommended condition, would allow them up to 60 months, which is very, very generous over and above what is standardly addressed, as you know. And so, but the intent behind working with them on that was to give them a lot more runway in order to have those sewer system improvements addressed because of all of the parties that are outside of their control.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Jeff, I have a quick question for you,
Sure.
just a small thing. In regards to lighting, and I haven't been a part of a project, I don't think, with this much lighting so close to a highway. So just clarification's sake, in regards to it being 8 o'clock on a Friday and someone's driving south on 395, what does that line of sight look like? Is that going to be a distraction? Is it an issue? How did you guys assess that?
So that was one of the issues that we weren't able to determine with our in-house resources, if you will, and that's why we provided that condition requiring the glare analysis that, to my knowledge, the applicant is fine with. But that would allow someone who is a professional in the field to address the potential impacts there. They will have to comply with the cutoff optics and the angles of the lighting and everything required by code, but in so doing, does that have impacts that are on the motoring public on 395? We were not able to determine that, and that's why we required that, recommended that condition.
So the glare analysis ultimately can be mitigated. We got issues with how it's set up. The glare analysis provides solutions, and it can be solved.
Yes, that would be the intent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And yes, exactly.
Okay. Commissioner Velto, I know you're out there.
Oh, yeah, thank you. No questions right now. I have some more thoughts for discussion.
Okay. Commissioners, any more questions, unless you guys would like to move into discussion? Commissioner Velto, why don't you slide us into discussion, buddy?
So I kind of want to talk about the line of questioning that Commissioner Johnson was asking and the limit on the number of events. My impression is that there's a limit on the number of events because there's a building code requirement that says you need to have certain facilities. I understand Commissioner Johnson's line of questioning and what came out of that to say that there'll be a point in time where they'll be compliant and avoid the issue. So we wouldn't necessarily want to put a condition that prohibits them from having more than 12 events going forward. But would it be possible to condition it that they couldn't have that number of events until a certain point in time that we'd be able to say what an event would happen? Is that kind of what you were getting at, Commissioner Johnson, or is that, I guess, do you have thoughts on what I just said?
Thank you, Commissioner Velto. Yeah, I think you're aligning with kind of where I was going with that, is that there seems to be some safeguards in place that are going to be required at the same time or simultaneously with the full build out of the site that would address the concerns that the limitation on the special event amount. In other words, that the limitation is there for things that aren't currently in place, but those things have to be in place in order to meet the thresholds that the special event activity is, or the special event limit is for. Did I answer your question, Commissioner Velto?
Yeah, yes, that helps.
And I'll slide in too, because I think just to that point, I guess, I'd love nothing more to have a community see something like this, and he nailed it with calling it a North Star. And it's about getting it right and doing it the right way, and not only for the impact of the neighbors and everything else and all the motoring public on 395, but ultimately I've kind of heard from them that there is a point to where if we are conditioning them so much, we won't have a successful complex. It won't be able to meet its greatest goals. And so we got to decide when it's meeting its greatest potential, are we compatible with everything else? And I kind of agree. I guess my point is, if we feel like they meet their potential of 70 events of 3,000 to 5,000 people, whatever it is, how are those being handled? And are we not hamstringing them right here in this room and giving the ability to, work with city and go from there? So those are just my thoughts. I want to see this succeed. I think we need it, but we need to take care of everything else in place. So I feel like we kind of covered that quite a bit.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Johnson, I guess from a discussion standpoint, I think what I'm struggling with, and I appreciated Commissioner Gower's comment about, there's usually a level of certainty that we see when it comes to traffic. It's like you're going to hit a level of service that's not going to be good. You're going to need to add a turn lane or right in, right out, or a traffic signal, or any one of those things. And they're usually based on a very, a tangible way for us to understand. It's a facility that people are going to be, apartment complex, people are going to be leaving it in the evening, or leaving it in the morning and coming back in the evening. We know when the traffic flow is going to be. We know that it's going to be constant 5 days a week and then limited on the weekends. This is a situation that's not at all like that. And so I appreciate staff's, apprehension at, committing to any of that. But I guess I would also maybe look at just trying to understand what how exactly we're wording this, because we've got a requirement that requires this additional third-party review or this additional traffic study that's going to come out with requirements that are there. But we're not specifically saying in our conditions that, this is what the applicant shall do. The applicant shall be required to comply with the study, or the applicant shall be required to, provide whatever. We don't know what those special events things are going to be. So we're almost, as you say, hamstringing the project in the sense that, we're telling them that they have to do this third-party review. We're telling them that they have to comply with whatever that is, but we don't know what that is, and we don't know really how that incorporates into anything else that's going on. So I have a fundamental issue with kind of where that's at, and I don't know what the resolution is, I think, to Commissioner Gower's point.
And I think that's, Commissioner Johnson, I think that's my issue too, is that we're being asked to make a decision, and the decision is based on a set of conditions that is pushing the generation of information that we would normally get as part of our decision-making further down the line. So we're being asked to issue a conditional use permit. I personally don't have an issue with the cut and fills or the hillside development, but the arena stadium component, I mean, I'm hearing from staff that they don't know about traffic, they don't know about glare, the signage question. I mean, Jeff, I understand that we can reference code, but I don't have that analysis in front of me to be able to reference what that looks like to make my decision right now. So I just feel like we're putting the onus on the applicant through these conditions to generate information that staff can use to make their decision, but it's in a way essentially circumventing our decision-making process because we don't have any of that information at our fingertips to really make an informed decision, if that makes sense. We're putting it all into conditions at this point, and I'm just frankly not comfortable with that. I mean, I want to see this project move forward, I think, as much as anyone else in this room. Maybe not as much as you, Mark. I know you want to see it move forward more than anybody.
Do you come up to the microphone, please?
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to hear out.
Okay,
Mr.
great. I was going to
Mr.
ask if
Radel.
you wanted to continue, but
Commissioner Gower, I very much appreciate that. You're thinking you may not have the actual information, but Chris has the information, and it is in clear format. And if you give him a moment, let him please share that with you.
And can I just interject? Can you state your name for the record, please?
My name is Mark Radau, the applicant.
So traffic is one issue. I know you have that information. I know you've included it in the staff report. My concern is that staff is saying that they're asking for a third-party review of the information that you've provided that would generate an additional set of information further down the road from our decision-making process. Traffic is one component. There's the outstanding issue of the special use, special event permits in terms of how many should be issued and how many shouldn't. I don't know that any of us know the right answer to that question. There's the lighting component that the chairman answered that staff wasn't able to answer. And there's a question relating to signage that we can't answer. There's a design component related to restrooms that can't be answered. I mean, those are pretty fundamental questions to our decision-making process that we just don't have the answers to right now. And I mean, we can go through the traffic study. I don't really want to do that right now because that's only one of 5 components for me, Mr. Chairman.
thank you, Commissioner Gower. Commissioner Velto, anything?
This is a tough one because I hear what Commissioner Gower is saying, and there's a lot there seemingly is some uncertainty, but this is a project I think we all want to see happen, and that's what makes this so difficult is, if this is a project that ends up if they have the success that they want, and we have 50 events a year, that'd be incredible. That'd be really good for the community. So it's very tough. So I'm interested in hearing how other folks may assess what Commissioner Gower has said.
Can I just ask why the applicant declined staff's request for additional time to get this information?
Opportunity knocks. My name is Mark Radau, I'm the applicant. Opportunity knocks today. And in a few ways, opportunity knocks. There's suitable land that has reasonable access, reasonable visibility, but more so, and you actually asked about bifurcating the fields to the stadium idea or the arena idea. Well, it doesn't work that way. Okay, it doesn't. If you just want another county park, you're going to get a county park, but you're not going to get the North Star. Commissioner Drakulich, you need the North Star. It doesn't work without the North Star. Well, I'm not the guy that hands out those opportunities. I just was there to pick it up and run with it. And I bought a piece of land that this can work. But the U.S. Soccer tells me when there's an opportunity, and they want to expand. Reno right now is a blemish because there was a team here that left. Why'd they leave? Because they tried to put a square peg in a round hole. And I missed this opportunity. We missed this opportunity. You missed this opportunity. Our kids missed this opportunity. It's there today. It's right there today. I was on the phone with the MLS and USL, and their number one question is, how's it going, Mark? Well, I thought we were good, but now I'm concerned because this door closes, it does not open again. I don't make the calendar. And it's honestly, we approve it, we go forward, and we work with each other.
Understood.
We don't want things backing up. We have to work with each other.
Understood.
We have to be a good citizen. But I don't see another piece of land in Reno, and I don't see another window opening with U.S. Soccer.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes to my point is now back to the hamstringing issue. Let's say we do approve and we discuss how we make that happen. Then all of a sudden we can't have this many people there, and whoever the the person who's knocking on your door to make this happen. Now we're not hitting the mark, and now we've got a complex that can't even fit your greatest potential because we rushed it. And I think that's where I'm kind of with you there. So that's the problem I kind of seeing with it too. If we don't have enough information, then we push it through, and you're right, new generation down a couple months, and then all of a sudden city and building permits tell you you can only do X, Y, Z, that's what it's going to be, and it's not enough to hit your goals or to have a team here. Then what did we just build? And what did we just do here, and how did we impact the community by that? I don't know what the solution is. I mean, I would love to find a way to not completely detriment your timing. I don't know if, and I could be wrong here, maybe Jason can help me solve, but a continuation so we can see some of this data. And if that's the case, I don't know what to tell you. It might be the hard truth that comes from tonight. If we don't have enough, then it might not happen, but maybe a continuation of some kind helps us. And maybe it's a month or 2 or 3 meetings from now, if we can get that peer-reviewed analysis, some other information done, that would, I get it. I know what you're going to say in regards to it's going to be gone next week kind of thing, but it might be a harsh reality.
Is Mark Radau?
Yeah.
What do you think I'm going to say?
Say, addressing, go ahead, Commissioner Armstrong.
So not to preempt what you're going to say, I'll just ask you, what is the opportunity that you lose by having this potentially go forward or allow us to get more information? Like, it sounds to me like this is going to be done in phases, and we're not immediately going to be able to ramp up to this professional kind of stadium event threshold, right? I mean, is that the day one plan? Or so just help us understand, what is the sense of urgency? What do you actually lose by allowing us to continue this and get the information that we've asked for?
If the grandstands aren't complete, I get a waiver, but that waiver is contingent on the fact that it will be complete. And if I can't go back, if we can't go back and tell Major League Soccer that there will be a stadium with 5,000 seats, you don't pass go, you don't collect $200. You're out. It's handed to somebody else, and we lose. And I don't make. Yeah, there's a gun to head. We have to decide, and I think there's and we have an opportunity where this project is privately funded. It's not $1 billion project from for like the Oakland Raiders. It's not 1 penny of expense to the city. This is a very unique opportunity this is a gift. And there's some very motivated people in the community. Some are here behind us today that have said, let's do this. The city needs this, as you all know. But the window of opportunity is only open for the day. I kid you not. you might as well just deny it if you're not going to approve it. Because if it's a delay, you miss not just the 2024 and the 25. You don't get to open the door down the road. It's not our choice to do that.
Mr. Chairman, if I could.
Please,
follow
go
up
ahead.
on that?
Yeah.
Mr. So what do you need to show back to them? Because even if we say we approve this conditional use permit, there's still a lot of information that you need from staff. I mean, is that going to be the assurance that you need that the planning commission said we approve your conditional use permit? Because staff, like the chairman said, could come back and say, we need this additional information. We're not gonna, we can't move forward until we get X, Y, Z. The ideal scenario that I think we're all looking for is that we have the information that we need to be able to say, stand up and say, yeah, this is fantastic.
We
We're
have
all
this
on
in-
board with it. We're unanimous. Let's move forward. Let's make this happen. And we're ready to stand up and do that.
Well, then let's
But
do it.
Let's
do it.
But we have a job to do.
Well,
We need
I understand
information
that,
to make our
but
decision.
we
don't
have all the
it. That's
information.
That's
the
the
glare
challenge
study,
right now.
the study shows that there's no glare, and granted, we've agreed to a set of conditions. There was some red line.
You've agreed to conditions that generate information to
No.
show that. Then let's see the lighting study. Gabe, do you have the lighting study? That shows glare from 395? Maybe we're not asking the right questions.
Yes, we have the lighting study. We've done the sound study. The signage issue, not a major issue. Whatever the code allows us to put on the building, that's fine. Because we're more concerned about what's happening internal, like Commissioner Johnson talked about. I think it was Commissioner Johnson. So we have the information. The issue on traffic, we know the exact number in 2050 that triggers the level of service concern, but it's not even a trigger until 2050.
All right, thank you, Mr. Rito. I want to defer back to the chairman. We're in discussion. We've kind of deviated away from questions here. I'm going to give the meeting back to you.
We're going to keep it going. Well, Jeff, if you want to come up, but Mr. Garcia has some potential solutions for us or paths forward that we can start discussing.
So I think the commission sees where staff's position is and was. As far as kind of a path forward, the proposal before you, we conditioned it in a way with the materials that we had, that we were comfortable with, that hopefully with mitigations in addressing traffic impacts and other code requirements would allow this proposal to move forward. That being said, that's option one, so to say, is the proposal before you with the staff accepted conditions, as well as the modifications proposed by the applicant that staff has accepted. That's option one. Option two would be to continue it to a future date to address some of the issues that have come up before or with discussion tonight. Jeff, did you have anything to add to that?
I did. Jeff Foster, Associate Planner for the record. Two things. One is, Commissioner Gower, I appreciate your line of questioning on the lighting issue. It was you, right? I've lost track already. Multiple people. Okay. I don't think that's an issue so much because the NDOT's email that came in yesterday did say that they had no concerns about the glare on 395. That came in yesterday, so we already had the staff report out. You already had it, so the condition was left in there. But ultimately, I still think I would recommend that you leave the condition in there to have that analysis done by a professional. But NDOT, in their relatively quick review, said that they did not have any concerns on the glare issue. With regard to the traffic study, the Mike Michelle has given me a potential condition that perhaps we could wordsmith, but effectively that the traffic study and the improvements identified in the traffic study would be implemented prior to a phase wherein they would be necessary. So I know it still kicks the can down the road a bit in terms of the actual analysis, but in terms of addressing potential, not necessarily required, but potential physical improvements, that the condition would be such that those improvements would have to be made in order for that subsequent phase where they would be necessary. You see where I'm going with that? So a potential opportunity there.
Go ahead, Commissioner Armstrong.
So thank you for that extra color. Look, I want to be solution oriented about this. This is one of the most popular public support projects we've seen. I've only been on since November, but I haven't seen support like this for anything in my short time here. So I understand how important it is. So I'd prefer not to continue it. It sounds like there is an impetus to get this thing moving, but I would be comfortable with the condition that you just laid out. I'm happy to have some subject twos and moving the can down the road if that helps us at least make some progress. But I don't want to deviate any further from what city staff has signed off on. So I would support, basically what we have in front of us with the caveat that, any improvements required to facilitate the stadium ramp up would be completed.
Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Johnson. Thank you, Jeff. That was actually, when it came around to me again, that was going to be my concern is that, and going back to where I was when Commissioner Gower and I were talking, I think the biggest concern I have on this is that the wording of some of these conditions is what I think is tripping us up. The wording, it was the first time we'd seen anything about peer review, so I appreciate that explanation being out there, but I guess what I was looking for in something that you've brought up is similar to what we've seen on other things, where there is the applicant shall be required to, complete the, items included per the traffic study. And we've seen that before with traffic studies that they've been preliminary or they've talked about additional numbers or anything like that. And the applicant has agreed to, as a condition, to comply with what those recommendations are. And I think that's what I'm not seeing here. I'm seeing complete a peer review. This may be required, this may not be required. And that's the lack of finality that I think we're struggling with. So if there is a way to, add to or modify specifically, and it's really it's the condition, 14 that kind of talks about additional proposed mitigations and or updates may be required during the special event permitting review. I want to make sure that we're separating the special event part, because that's where there's a whole bunch of stuff about the traffic. Between 13, there's a requirement to do the third party review, but it doesn't really talk about, it just talks about accepting it. It doesn't say anything about what the staff has to do. And then 14 kind of goes into the special use permit and talks about, or the special event permit and talks about them having to comply with that. I think there needs to be some clarity that there's a traffic study that needs to be completed, and the recommendations of that traffic study will be the responsibility of the applicant. And then a second one, and we can have a discussion about the special events if we want to, but then there needs to be a very clear delineation that, again, the special event issue will be looked at as a part of the traffic study, but the special event requirements are separate. That's a different permit. That's not something for us to do. We just need to discuss whether or not there's a limit on the number of special events based on what the report says there's a requirement for. That's what would make me more comfortable with what we're doing, because it adds some of that clarity that we don't have. I'm okay with a condition on a traffic study that needs to be reviewed, as long as we are indicating that the requirements of that are going to be complied with, because that is not an unusual thing for us to see. But we don't have that in these conditions. So that's where I was hoping to get to with that. So if staff is able to craft something, if they want to put it together, if the applicant or the applicant's representative has any feedback on whether that would be an acceptable approach, would certainly be happy to hear that. But I think that's the clarity that I'm looking for to get where I think we want to go.
And if I could jump in too, I just want to, however I want to get this through, I want to figure this out, is that 12 two-day event thing, I guess, is just sticking in my craw.
Is it 12 days or is it 24 days?
Oh boy, 12 two-day
two-day
events.
A single two-day event, 12 of those.
So, okay. So that's assuming there's like a tournament thing going on, which is not at all what we heard in terms of what the a planned approach to this is. We're hearing about single events happening 70 times a year, and we're giving them the ability to do 12 events twice a year.
So Jeff Foster, Associate Planner for the record. The 12 two-day events was based on the thinking that these larger events would happen over the weekend, i.e. Saturday, Sunday, hence the 2 days, and that they would cover the single large games, MLS, or a tournament that happens to trigger the threshold, and anything in between, right? So anything that triggered that, whether it's 2115 or whatever the final number ends up being, that at that trigger, any event would require those traffic controls and any of the other requirements from the special event permitting process, as you read from the condition a few minutes ago. But that those would happen on a weekend, whether it was a single game or a series of games, tournament, over the course of a weekend. So it was providing a maximum duration of 2 days, 12 times a year, whether it was a single game on one day or whatever. So, and again, just to give the commission a number, something to consider, because we were struggling too. How many?
Understood. And I guess, I appreciate that, Jeff. And I guess that, I'm not going to go too far into it because we've had some conversations, but I think what this condition allows is 12 two-day things, which is essentially traffic control. If you're thinking about it from a tournament standpoint, we've been there. It's 8 in the morning until 7 at night. And so we're basically, this is 2 days of that level of traffic, control. And that is not what I'm hearing the applicant is requesting. So again, maybe another thing for us to discuss, but I think that's a comment to throw out there.
Okay, we're going to take this opportunity to take a 10-minute break, and we're going to come back, and we're going to figure this out. So we'll be back at, I'm seeing 9:44 or 8:44. Yeah, oof. Thank you, guys. All right, everybody in the chambers, if you guys want to take your seats again, we'll get back from break. Do I officially need to say anything that we're back from break? Commissioner Velto back in with us?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good to hear from you, friend. All right, we're going to kick it back off, and we are going to start with Mr. Garcia's conversation. Feel free to go ahead.
Okay, so thank you, commissioners, for the discussion tonight. To address some of the comments and discussion, staff has looked at condition number 13, and I'll go ahead and read that. To address condition number 13, it shall state, prior to the issuance of any building permit for construction of the bleachers or clubhouse, the applicant shall provide a final traffic analysis prepared by a licensed professional engineer and enter into an agreement with city staff to contract a peer review of the submitted traffic study. The peer review shall be funded by the applicant, and the consultant shall be selected by city staff. The report shall identify required improvements. The applicant shall make required improvements. I think that should address condition number 13. I'll leave that up to the commission. For condition number 14, staff's perspective is if the appropriate mitigations are made in regards to traffic as well as the other code requirements, such as restrooms and other facilities, which would be resolved at a building permit stage, then that number could potentially be modified. So I'll leave that up to the commission based upon the number of events that were discussed by the applicant tonight. So let me know if you have any comments, but hopefully that gives some direction to the commission.
Thank you, Jason. Appreciate that. Open discussion. Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Johnson, thank you, Jason. Appreciate that. I guess my question either for Jeff or for the applicant is, have you, since these are conditions that we would be proposing to put upon the applicant, are the conditions as indicated by staff, at least for the modifications to number 13, acceptable to the applicant as a condition on the project? Or at least get your feedback on your thoughts about the proposed condition.
Go ahead. Give me your.
Here. Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Mark Raydown for the record. I just believe that this is your.
Can you
memo,
bring that
correct?
microphone
So we're
down
talking about
closer?
condition 13 and including the peer review.
Can you guys get a little closer to the microphone, please? Thank
Sorry,
you.
yes.
No, you're fine.
But is this the one that you provided to them, or do they have this?
Yes,
Okay. But this is your memo, yes or no?
yes.
Okay,
They're discussing condition 13,
yes.
and they just read the condition as they're proposing it, modified again by staff to include the traffic analysis and enter into the agreement. So this
Okay.
stricken is included.
So what we're asking is to end the first sentence at professional engineer, and then to strike the rest of that sentence.
So, Mr. Rado, I think that's what staff had recommended. They were going with this modification, and I think, Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, your modification's actually after that. So you're can you just read from the beginning while Mark's looking at his?
I'll read the full condition, but essentially what we're doing is in the memo that was provided to the commission, the strike through, we're actually re-adding back and then adding language regarding what the peer review will identify as far as required improvements, and then the applicant doing those improvements. So the condition will read, prior to the issuance of any building permit for construction of the bleachers or clubhouse, the applicant shall provide a final traffic analysis prepared by a licensed professional engineer and enter into an agreement with city staff to contract a peer review of the submitted traffic study. The peer review shall be funded by the applicant, and the consultant shall be selected by city staff. The report shall identify required improvements. The applicant shall make required improvements. So that's what staff is proposing as a,
Well, I realize that, okay. I don't want to speak for West Tech Consulting, and I don't want to speak for Chris Maltz, but I know that he is a licensed professional engineer, has years of study in doing this.
So
he was,
Mr. Riddell.
Yes, sir.
We've been talking about this for a long time,
Okay.
so I'm gonna cut you short. The question is, that was a modified condition that was presented by staff. We're going to discuss that condition.
Okay.
I don't want to discuss that condition unless I have an understanding that that is something, or that I've understood that you've heard that condition as we were proposing it, and it is not, you are correct. A licensed professional engineer has performed a traffic study. What the condition is requiring is a third-party review of that, and your, as the applicant, agreement to perform whatever the recommendations that that traffic study and that review of that traffic study dictate need to occur.
Well, okay, I understand that, but I don't follow what you're saying, Mr. Johnson, is that this unknown third-party engineer, that their unknown recommendations all of a sudden they become the final authority as to what is required for this particular site.
Okay, so that,
So
so I
I
appreciate
don't know
that.
why we're punting
So
from
again,
one
I'm
party
not-
to another
I'm-
party.
I appreciate that. You've answered my question in terms of that. So we understand what is being proposed by staff is addressing our issue about the uncertainty of where this is going to go.
Well,
it's not addressing your issue with respect to the third-party peer review, and that was the response that I was looking for.
What I would propose is that I would be completely open to any review of the published study, any deficiency or any concern of that would be vetted and resolved. But there hasn't been a pointed to a deficiency of the study. So I don't know why we're having to do yet another study when there isn't necessarily a deficiency of this one.
Okay, thank you. I think that, I appreciate that. I understand what you're saying. I just wanted to get an understanding of where we were all at in the difference between this and the and the way the condition was being worded versus where you were at. So I think that's what I was trying to understand.
So if there's a deficiency, I'm fine to vet that.
I understand.
Okay.
I understand where you're going. I think we'll just look at the language and discuss that amongst us. So thank you. Appreciate that. So I guess bringing
Go
it
ahead.
back to the condition, I think the biggest question in my mind, Jason, and that was at the end where we were specifically requiring conformance with the traffic analysis. So I think that was the key thing. If I'm understanding the condition right, we have a traffic analysis that has been completed, that staff is requiring a third-party review of that, and from that review, there will either be agreement or modifications to what's included in that in order to have a report that staff will review and that the engineers from the traffic side will also review, and that there will be some outcome of that that in theory is agreed upon by staff based on the recommendations.
I'm going to say yes to that, but I am going to look at our engineering manager. So just for agreement or comment.
And Mike, I think, appreciate you coming up. I think that
Mike Michelle,
ultimately-
engineering manager for the record.
Thank you, Mike. Ultimately, I'm just trying to understand here. You're not asking for another study to be done.
No.
You're asking for a review of the existing study.
Somebody to look at it other than city staff to look at it. We do third-party reviews for many things. We do it for hydrology studies. Half the building permits we have in the city, we do third-party peer reviews.
I'm aware.
So I mean, this is not a new concept.
Okay, so the intent is there is a third-party review that will be provided.
They're a
that the
reviewer.
app-
They are a reviewer.
They review it, and those comments on that will be provided back to the applicant for.
Those comments will be
to
provided,
response to
those
the city.
comments will be provided to city staff, and we'll evaluate those comments like we do any other third-party peer review.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. That's pretty clear to me at this point. Fellow commissioners?
So, yeah, I mean, that, Commissioner Gower, for the record, that makes sense with condition 13. I feel like condition 14, there's still a question in my mind. I get the first part of the condition talking about the peer review study will determine the number of special event permits required, but I'm still questioning why the condition includes a cap on the number of special event permits and if it needs to in a year. I wasn't clear on that condition originally. I know, Jeff, you explained it. Is there any sort of clarity on a number?
So, Jason Garcia-LeBoux, for the record, staff tried to come up with that number, and that's where we got that 12, as Jeff explained. Your commission has the authority to modify that number. Staff would be comfortable with that number being modified. We don't have a number at this point based on not having the information. But if the code requirements are met as well as the traffic mitigations, staff would be comfortable with that potential change or modification to that number.
Does staff feel that there needs to be a number there?
Well, the commission can ultimately require to remove that number, but that would essentially allow unlimited events. So I don't know if staff would necessarily be comfortable with that without having kind of further information on traffic analysis and other information at this time.
Thanks, Jason.
So the estimated amount of events, I think, is between 50 and 70, probably capping at 70. If we cap at 70, to give them the amount of runway that they expect to have to be successful, is that appropriate? So that's a comment for staff, but also other commissioners. Could we get there with that? Is it something folks would be comfortable with?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Johnson. So I think my understanding of any kind of limitation on this is was set based on needing to comply with special event requirements in the restrooms. I think we've clearly discussed through this evening that both of those will be in place prior to this happening. From what I heard this evening, we are looking at a level and a number of anticipated large cap events, which was 40 professional and 30 semi-professional. And at this point, and back to some of the original conversations about any level of hamstringing and the discussion about what could go on before that, in my mind, I would be looking at a number probably somewhere around 50. And the rationale that I say for that is the 40 anticipated professional level games with cushion for preseason, special, traveling teams coming in, postseason. There's a little bit of a buffer there. Plus, we also have this variable of maybe, the early games. I remember going to see 1868 games in the snow. There's a level of flexibility with whatever that number may be, that if they have to hit that certain threshold, putting that at 50, to me, addresses at least what we heard this evening. I would love for that to need to be 70 or 75 or 100, but I am also sensitive to staff's concerns about the fact that we don't actually know what these traffic things are going to be. We do have a population that uses Parr Boulevard to access their homes at times when there may be some points here, and I would like to be sensitive to that, and knowing that there is the option, hopefully, that this is successful to the point where we're going to exceed that 50, where it's an easy, I wouldn't say easy because we've been here for 3 hours talking about this, but a conditional use permit to increase that number should we need to. But in my mind, 12 is way too low. The 2-day thing is not appropriate. Hearing what we heard tonight, I want to make sure that we are putting it at a point where it gets as far established as possible. So if I was to throw a number out there, that would be 50 would be my number for the cap, based on, again, as Jason said, the compliance with the requirements for the threshold for the special event. So as long as that's in place and everything else is in place.
And if I may, just for point of clarification, we give a cap of 50, and 7 years from now, it's hyper successful and they need 20 more a year, they can come back for a CUP? Okay.
That's correct.
Okay. Then I would support Commissioner Johnson's 50 cap. I think he's right, being sensitive to staff's perspective and understanding where they need to start, but also getting people to a level where we want to be tonight.
Yeah, I can get there with 50. I think that's totally appropriate. Thank you.
Commissioner Velto?
I would support a motion consistent with what's been discussed.
Thank you. Jason, go ahead.
So just to clarify, this would be the conditions of approval presented in the staff report with said modifications to items 2, 5, 16, and 17. And then what we just addressed with item 13 that I read into the record, as well as item 14 and changing that to 50 events. Is that correct?
Can you read that? Yes, but I would like, can you reread the modified condition 14, please?
So condition 14 would be staff's original recommended condition, was switching 12 for 50. So it would be a special event shall be required for any activity identified in the peer review study as requiring special traffic controls or street closures. Special event permits for the site shall be limited to a maximum of 50 events per calendar year. Additional proposed mitigations and or updates may be required during special event permitting review.
And we're striking the items in red. I did not hear you read that in, correct?
That's correct. That's what the applicant has proposed.
Am I wrong to think we don't need those in there? The red lines when it's talking about and shall apply to sporting and non-sporting events. Because we're just applying a 50.
So I think my understanding is we are modifying the original condition in the staff report, not the clarification of that.
Okay. Jeff, do you want to chime in?
Jeff Foster, Associate Planner for the record. The reason that staff did not support the proposed amendment to condition number 14 was the applicant was proposing to differentiate sporting events versus non-sporting events. They haven't really talked about it tonight, but there's the potential that there could be speakers and other kinds of public engagements and things like that that would also exceed the threshold requiring the traffic controls. So Commissioner Johnson, and to your point about the 50, that may provide the buffer that they need for the 40 games, but in theory, they were also proposing other types of events. Taking advantage of having the facility there makes all the sense in the world, right? So we were proposing to keep the condition as is because we didn't want the limit of the 12, the staff did not support the limit of 12 being removed for the sporting events, leaving the non-sporting events at 12. And so if you read the text in red, that was the applicant's attempt at basically having unlimited sporting events, but only 12 non-sporting events. So if we keep them all together because they address the same issues in terms of traffic and whatnot, then that's the amended condition that Jason read with just simply changing 12 to 50.
Thank you, Jeff. Understandable. Applicant representative, briefly, you had your hand up, but be succinct if you have a point you want to make.
Gabe Whitler. Yeah, that's what I just wanted to clarify to make sure that we all understand exactly what we're referring to here in special events, and that it is whatever has triggered that threshold number. Right now with an addendum, we're saying it's around 2,100 attendees, seats, would trigger the offsite need for traffic control. So anything above that, but equal to above that is going to be a special event and require the special event permit. And as we've talked through with the number of potential sporting events there, that's where we felt if the concern is if you have unlimited events at this facility, they build it, they sell it the next year to somebody, and they come in with an entitlement to do whatever kind of events they want all year round. I can see where that's going to be a problem. So that's where our thought was, if this is a request for a sports stadium, a sports arena, to me that comes with, I hate to use the analogy, but I don't think there's a cap on the number of baseball games that can be held at the Aces Stadium. So when we're with our approval for a sports stadium or sports arena, that comes with, an assumed schedule and the ability to play sports there at will, if you will. So that was our proposal, was if we designate these sporting events, what it's meant for, unlimited, but anything non-sporting, that, the 12 cap, we were fine with that, because it's who knows what that will be. This is intended to be a soccer stadium, but obviously it's a facility that can hold people. There may be other types of events there. So that was our thinking in that. And so you're right. It's hard to put a number to limiting sporting events at if you're going to invest tens of millions of dollars into building a sporting event for the community or a sporting facility, and then you can only use it X number of times, that, I can understand why that would be very scary for an applicant to agree to. So.
Okay, give us a moment to discuss that.
Thank you.
I guess what I'm hearing is, if we're giving them 50 special events, and what they were trying to do is, if they had any non-sporting related event, they wanted some extra stretch, which would have been 12, and that could be a concert or some other creative way of using the space. I can see his point that he's making, and I guess I didn't grab onto that when we were reading this originally, so I just want to throw that out there for need to think about that deeper.
Chairman?
Please.
This is Commissioner Velto, and I err towards giving them much more leniency than being strict on the number of events. If they can use this space for good, and there's going to be checks, we're going to have to go through the special event process. That will address a lot of the concerns. I just think that we should err towards giving them more events than less events, and allowing for this to be a successful project. I also just want to clarify, the events, that wouldn't include, say, just a weekend. Would that include a 1 day or a 2 day event? Like, could they have a 2 day event that's one event? Would this include other use of the fields? I just want to make sure we're not overly restricting what they can do.
Thank you. I hear you. Same thoughts.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Johnson, so it is a good point. So I guess going back to the initial conversation that we had, do we as a commission, if we have conditioned this to address traffic concerns, or acknowledge that the traffic concerns will be addressed, and they're not going to get a building permit for what they're looking to do without addressing the restroom concerns, we have conditions for the sewer concerns, and there is a process for a special event permit. Do we have a rationale for limiting the number of special events of a certain type in a stadium that is built for that type? I guess that's the question.
I think as long as we can get there on, I think it's condition 13, where they agree to have that report reviewed and basically take onus of anything that's required to make it happen. I don't have really a preference towards the amount of events, and it makes sense for it to not be capped on a sporting front, because the whole point is to establish it as a sporting arena. I just think if we're being asked to fast track this and not have the information that we'd be accustomed to having, then a fair concession is to have that condition 13 amended, but not necessarily cap the amount of events, because we assume if they meet those conditions, then it's going to work the way it's intended to work, and we don't want to hamstring it if they do the work to bring it into compliance with what's needed for it to be successful and for the city to embrace it.
Jeff, go ahead. Thank you.
Jeff Foster, Associate Planner for the record. I would point out that one additional consideration here is condition number 12, which we have not been discussing. But if you look at the end of condition number 12, it basically has a clawback mechanism that's in code, but we're putting it in the condition where effectively the CUP could be revoked if things aren't happening according to plan, according to agreement with the applicant. So I bring that up to point out that there's the potential that if you do provide a higher number of events, and then for some reason things go sideways, the city has the ability to claw back, to close to revoke the conditional use permit. So concerns over a capped number or removing the capped number could potentially be reduced or alleviated by recognizing that we can call, and I know there's a process and it's not exactly easy, but it is something that could be done. And it's built into the condition in relation to the special event permits and the safety and, the operations and security plan. So it all ties together.
Thank you, Jeff. Commissioner Gower.
What are the commission's thoughts on the non-sport related events?
12's probably fine. Whatever was proposed for non-sporting related events, I'd be okay with.
Agreed.
I guess my thought is there's not really a lot of difference. I guess the reason we would cap a non-sporting related event is for, in the anticipation, as the applicant's representative said, of a use other than what's here. So if any event triggers the special event conditions, it doesn't matter whether it's a soccer game or a concert or anything else. If we're looking at using the elements of the conditions and the requirements for that to be in place as long as the event triggers it, I don't know that we need to differentiate. That's just, I throw that back out there as a point of discussion. I don't know what the difference, what the special event difference would be. Maybe it's like it's an all day, festival or something like that. Maybe that would be a reason for it. I guess that's just, we're speculating at this point. But if we are going to put a cap on non-sporting events, I would support 12.
This is Commissioner Velto. I agree with Commissioner Johnson. I don't think there's a difference between a sporting event and a non-sporting event. It's a lot of people that show up at a similar time and then leave. I just really don't think we should condition this project to not succeed, and I'm concerned that we're focusing on a lot of things that might make it so this project doesn't succeed.
Thank you. Commissioner Gower's deep in thought. I think he wants to talk. Okay.
Well, I'm ready to make a motion, so if you do have additional thoughts, then I will hold off.
I think we're all trying to get there and have a huge win. Am I reading right? Are you going to be motioning to have no cap on either?
Yes.
Any discussion around that?
I'm just going to wait to hear the motion.
Okay. All right. Fire away, buddy.
Okay, I may need some help just walking through the particulars of it, but in relation to case number LDC 23-0046, Battleborn Football Club Complex, Based upon compliance with the applicable findings, I move to approve the conditional use permit subject to the conditions.
Subject to modification of conditions 2, 5, 13, 14, 16, as discussed. Do you need me to spell those out?
Yeah, sorry, one more time. Subject to modifications of conditions 2, 5,
2, 5, 13,
13,
14, 16, and 17.
16, and 17. Listed in the staff report.
And as modified on conditions 13 and 14 per discussion.
And as modified on conditions 13 and 14 per discussion.
And for clarity.
Commissioner Velto, all second.
Okay. And for discussion, so for clarity on 14, no cap on special events.
Correct.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Michelle will do a roll call vote.
Alex Velto,
Yes.
Mark Johnson,
Yes.
JD Draculich,
Yes.
Peter Gower,
Yes.
Harris Armstrong.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Good luck with your project. Thanks for hashing that out with us. I can tell you we have a lot of proud commissioners wanting to see an amazing project come to this community. Hopefully you see it through. Good luck. All right, that closes item number 6, public hearings. Moving on to item number 7, Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Liaison Report.
Commissioner Johnson, there has been no meeting since our last one. The next meeting is actually going to occur on Monday, April 3rd. So the same week as our next meeting.
Thank you. Closing item 7, moving to item 8, staff announcement. Jason, please.
Jason Garcia-LeBou, Planning Manager for the record. At the April 5th meeting, we have 2 items scheduled. Staff is planning on also doing a training. It'd probably be disclosures and the APA legal training. And then just a note to commissioners, I just want to emphasize how important it is to check those emails, and Michelle will be following up with you on whether or not you can attend future meetings, because we have some master plan items coming up. So we do have some minimum numbers. We have to have at least 5 commissioners for those events. So please let Michelle know. She'll be following up with you. I also wanted to let you know April 19th, the Planning Commission meeting. Prior to the Planning Commission meeting, we're scheduling a 5:30 Capital Improvements Advisory Committee meeting. So that'll be just prior, and that you'll be notified of that. So just kind of a heads up on that. More to come. And I think that was all of the updates from staff at this point. Let me know if you need anything. Thank you, Commissioners.
Yep. Thank you, Jason. Closing item 8, moving on to item 9, Commissioner suggestions for future agenda items.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Johnson, one thing that we heard this evening in the Turkey Meadows, the annual report, was information about the city receiving the LEED city certification. I know it's been a while. There was a sustainability report that was brought to this commission at one point, but that was prior to anything on that. I would be interested to get a brief presentation about what exactly the city is doing from that standpoint to have made that achievement. And then obviously the follow-up to that is the next round of sustainability initiatives for the city. Thank you.
Any other items, commissioners? Looks like not. Moving on to item number 10, public comment. This item is for either public comment on any action item or for any general public comment. Michelle, do we have any public comment?
I did not receive any request to speak forms, no correspondence, and no voicemails were received.
All right. Anybody else in the chambers wish to speak? All right. Thank you. Seeing none.
And I don't think anybody on Zoom wants to speak.
Okay. My apologies. Now we'll close public comment, moving to item 11, adjournment. All in favor? Aye. Good night, Alex.